Chapter 787. Master has a benevolent and compassionate heart. It is truly a blessing for all living beings in this world to have Master presiding over it. Why don't you just stay? Yu Qianqiu chuckled and flattered. Bai Changchun was indifferent to his flattery. Expressionlessly, he stared at the mountain wall made of skeletons, which looked as if they were alive. Then he slowly said, "No one can protect the human world for generations to come. The way of heaven has its own rules. If the heavens have feelings, they will grow old. The right path of the human world is full of vicissitudes. The things that should be experienced can never be avoided. I should have left long ago." He tried to persuade him again, but to no avail. Yu Qianqiu simply shut up. He knew that since the old man had come to the underworld gate, there was no use in persuading him. He silently accompanied Bai Changchun, accompanying him to inspect the underground space that was different from the human world. In the huge space that flickered, the master and disciple slowly walked to the front of the majestic underworld gate. Even with Bai Changchun's high cultivation, standing in front of the gate gave people a feeling of insignificance. Separated by a gate, the difference between the human world and the netherworld made Bai Changchun, who had his hands behind his back, feel a little emotional. Bai Changchun stared at the portraits of men, women, old, and children painted on the door for a long time. He carefully observed them over and over again. His eyes flickered with uncertainty. In the end, he slowly closed his eyes and furrowed his brows, as if he was contemplating something. Yu Qianqiu was a little curious. He also looked at the carvings on the gate but didn't see anything unusual. After a long time, Bai Changchun slowly opened his eyes and gazed at the gate again. He stared at the heaven-swallowing beast's head that was missing a knocker. Then he looked back at Yu Qianqiu meaningfully and said, "This gate contains the truth of the great Tao. It's extremely profound. I'm afraid it's not something that the underworld emperor or the immortal emperor could build. I don't know how long it's been guarding here. Since it was destroyed by your hands, I'm afraid you'll have to give it a perfect ending." These words were very mysterious. Yu Qianqiu was confused and scratched his head. "Give it a perfect ending? Master, what do you mean?" All things in the cycle of reincarnation have a beginning and an end. The end is the beginning and the beginning is the end. This is called reincarnation and perfection. Bai Changchun explained. F***ck me. What the hell? Why was it even more mysterious than what he had said before? The corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched. He nodded with a silly smile. Actually, he didn't understand a single word. He was just pretending to understand. He didn't want to ask anymore. The answers he received were getting more and more mysterious. It was easy for the speaker, but it was hard for him to listen. However, not long after Bai Changchun said these words, the entire underground space immediately produced many chaotic echoes of different heights, but they were all repeating Bai Changchun's words. The portraits of men, women, old, and children on the underworld gate seemed to have come to life in an instant. They were reciting along with Bai Changchun, and their voices echoed in the huge underground space. The lifeless airflow in the underground space instantly became restless, whistling wildly. The flames in the netherworld flame sea suddenly rose and fiercely burned, seeming extremely mysterious and strange. Yu Qianqiu looked around dumbfoundedly. If these words didn't come from Bai Changchun's mouth, if Bai Changchun wasn't still by his side, if Bai Changchun's expression was still calm, he would have already teleported away. The netherworld flame sea that was burning fiercely gradually calmed down. When the strange scene in the underground space calmed down again, Yu Qianqiu finally let out a sigh of relief. He looked at Bai Changchun with eyes full of worship. This old fellow's cultivation was really high, so high that it was unfathomable. He even knows how to use spells to heighten the atmosphere. This is an expert. It's worth learning, it's worth learning. Suddenly his eyes popped out. His expression was like he had seen a ghost as he stared at the underworld gate. Originally, the portraits of men, women, old, and children on the gate had all kinds of strange expressions. Happiness, anger, sorrow, and happiness were all there, depicting all kinds of life. However, at this moment, the expressions of the portraits of men, women, old, and children on the gate had all turned into smiles. Each and every one of them revealed a satisfied smile, as if they had been enlightened by Buddha and had already escaped from the sea of bitterness. This. Yu Qianzhou's mouth opened so wide that his fist could be stuffed inside. He pointed at the underworld gate, bewildered, and pointed again and again, asking Bai Changchun to quickly look. However, Bai Changchun's expression was indifferent, as if he didn't care at all. Yu Qianzhou closed his mouth and quickly rubbed his eyes. He thought that he was hallucinating, but in the end, the smiling faces on the underworld gate were still there. He swallowed his saliva and ran to the front of the gate to touch it. It seemed like it was real, and not an illusion. Oh my God! Yu Qianzhou stumbled back a few steps in succession. Turning his head back to look at Bai Changchun, he pointed at the netherworld gate with a backhand and said with a sheepish smile, Master, why your cultivation is really high, too high. He simply couldn't believe it. Just a few words could change the expressions of the people on the underworld gate. Moreover, it was so lifelike without a trace. This cultivation was just too terrifying. Was he still human? He was simply a god. Move aside. Bai Changchun said lightly. Yu Qianzhou gave an "oh" sound and quickly moved to the side. Bai Changchun stretched out his hand that was behind his back and pushed the underworld gate in front of him. Yu Qianzhou immediately felt a majestic aura rush out, gently but powerfully pushing the underworld gate. With a rumbling sound, a crack appeared on the majestic underworld gate, and an eerie aura immediately blew out from the crack. The airflow in the underground space instantly became incomparably chaotic, and the netherworld flame crazily danced. As the crack on the gate became wider and wider, a dense cold wind blew out from inside and swept through the underground space. The light flickered rapidly. Even with Yu Qianzhou's current cultivation, it was a little hard for him to stay where he was. He quickly held the underworld tablet next to the underworld gate. After the gate was opened to about a meter wide, Bai Changchun faced the strong wind and slowly walked out as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. Yu Qianzhou knew that Bai Changchun was about to leave the human world and head to the underworld. After a series of complicated expressions, he suddenly shouted, Master, do you have anything else to say to this disciple? As the strong wind blew, Bai Changchun turned around and stared at him with bright eyes. He indifferently smiled and said, Walk your own path. Don't let me down. A short sentence couldn't be considered an explanation. After he finished speaking, he resolutely turned around and didn't stop at all. His body turned into a ray of green light and disappeared into the black whirlpool behind the underworld gate. After he entered the underworld gate, it closed with a rumble until it was seamless. The entire underground space gradually returned to its calm state. Yu Qianzhou looked at the closed underworld gate in a daze. He seemed to be in a daze. He couldn't understand why parting was always unavoidable in life. He suddenly clenched his fist and shouted, Master, I definitely won't let you down. You will see it in the future, I will definitely let you see it. These words seemed to have been said a little too late. It seemed like he should have said it before Bai Changchun left. However, this shout seemed to have used up all of his strength. He weakly leaned against the underworld tablet and slid to the ground. There was no sadness of parting on his face, only a lonely smile. He sat there alone and shook his head with a faint smile as he recalled the past between the master and disciple. He sat there alone for a very long time. When he woke up again, his emotional side was once again restrained. He had a shrewd expression on his face as he jumped up. No one knew what he thought of, but he directly dove into the netherworld flame sea and appeared at the entrance of the netherworld cave. He stared at the cave wall and found the inscription on the wall. Damn it. The old man has gone to the netherworld realm to stir up trouble. I hope he doesn't come up with some netherworld envoy who wants to find me by name. Yu Qianzhou muttered to himself. He found the words that he had inscribed on the wall. Then he covered his palm with a green flame and rubbed it against the wall a few times, erasing all his words. After seeing Nongzhu's inscription, he originally didn't want to care about it. Maybe one day he could see Nongzhu's excitement. However, after thinking about it, If something happened to Nongzhu, he would inevitably be implicated. Therefore, he completely destroyed Nongzhu's inscription and Bai Changchun's. After doing all this, he looked along the winding netherworld cave and suddenly thought of Yu Ji outside. He remembered that he had promised her that if he had the ability, he would help her leave the Demon Spectre region. Now that Bai Changchun was gone, the Demon Spectre region was completely under his control. If he let a ghost cultivator out, he could be sure that there would not be any trouble. It was time to fulfill his promise. He disappeared directly. When he appeared in the Chilly Wind Valley, it immediately caused a commotion among the ghost cultivators. He hadn't announced the succession of the Demon Domain Torture Master in the Demon Domain, mainly because he didn't want to cause a commotion in the Demon Domain. Now he didn't have time to take care of the Demon Domain every day, so it was good to continue to use the old guy's prestige to deter people. Even so, everyone in the Chilly Wind Valley knew that he was above tens of thousands of people in the Demon Domain, so they were very respectful. Yu Qianqiu asked if Yu Ji was there. As a result, Yu Ji and other key figures in the Chilly Wind Valley were checking the entrance of the Netherworld Cave because of the change. Yu Qianqiu asked someone to find Yu Ji and said that he had something to talk to her alone. A ghost cultivator immediately went to report. He directly entered the Ghost King's hall without any hindrance and went straight to Yu Ji's throne and sat down. Almost at the same time when he sat down, Yu Ji had already flashed in quickly. She quickly walked to the throne and bowed, saying, "Greetings, sir." Sitting on the throne, Yu Qianqiu looked at the charming Yu Ji with a smile and asked lightly, "Yu Ji, do you remember a promise I made to you when I first met you and General Meng? Now it's time for me to fulfill this promise." Yu Ji's delicate body trembled. She looked at him and bit her lips tightly, looking very excited. It seemed that she didn't expect that this day would really come. However, when she looked around the empty Ghost King's hall, she was stunned, and her face gradually became gloomy. She slowly knelt down in front of Yu Qianqiu and said with a lonely smile, "Thank you, sir." At first, Yu Ji wanted to leave with the general, but now the general is gone. No matter how colorful the outside world is, Yu Ji doesn't want to enjoy it alone. Chapter 788. Yu Qianqiu left Ill Wind Valley and returned to Lust City's inn. Previously, under his repeated inquiries, Yu Ji finally rejected his good intentions. She did not want to abandon Meng Yan's old subordinates, and decided to continue being her Ghost King. Yu Qianqiu did not expect this female ghost to be so loyal. He had underestimated her. Now, he felt that this woman could be used, but it depended on whether there was a chance. At the same time, Bai Changchun's departure affected him greatly. Seeing the gap between him and his master widening, he was even more determined to work hard. Just as he said in front of the Netherworld Gate, he hoped that he would not disappoint Bai Changchun when he saw him again. After knocking on Immortal Lord Crocodile's door, Yu Qianqiu closed the door and walked straight to Immortal Lord Crocodile, who was sitting cross-legged, and said indifferently, "Come, let's go to the Immortal City." Immortal Lord Crocodile was startled. What's wrong? He did not know why this fellow, who always talked about safety, decided to take the risk. This Huang Tian is a small character in the East Holy Land. I don't know how long it will take for him to help me find information about the Purple Fire. I can't wait. Yu Qianqiu's gaze was resolute. Let's take the initiative and go to the Immortal City. There should be people there who know. Immortal Lord Crocodile pondered for a moment. With my current cultivation, if something happens to the Immortal City, I might not be able to protect you. Don't worry, I can protect you, Yu Qianqiu said with a chuckle. Immortal Lord Crocodile glanced at him and sneered. Protect me? Are you kidding? If that's the case, why drag me along? You can go by yourself. Yu Qianqiu said shamelessly, if you can't beat us, then run. Did you forget that we can leave the East Holy Land? Immortal Lord Crocodile was speechless. He slowly said, I advise you not to take this risk. There are many experts in the Immortal City. I can hide my identity from others, but I can't hide it from Yi Shao and Ji Wu. With their cultivation, I'm afraid they can see through me at a glance. All Ji Wu? Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and sneered. I almost forgot to tell you. Yi Xiao and the two Netherworld generals hiding underground have already been killed by my master. That Ji Wu was also severely injured by my master. She was lucky to survive. How would she have the time to visit you? What? Immortal Crocodile stood up abruptly and exclaimed, "Are you telling the truth?" Cut the crap. Let's talk on the way. Yu Qianqiu threw out a few silver balls and glanced at him. Immortal Lord Crocodile closed his eyes out of habit. When the two of them reappeared, they were already on a yellow plain outside the city. This was the place where Yu Qianqiu had been cultivating his earth formula. The two of them didn't know where the immortal city was. Back then, Immortal Lord Crocodile didn't have a so-called immortal city in the Holy East Lands. Fortunately, when Yu Qianqiu was chatting with Huang Tian, he had kept an eye out and figured out where the immortal city was. It should be in the center of the Holy East Lands. After the two of them determined their direction, they quickly flew toward the center of the Holy East Lands. Along the way, under Immortal Lord Crocodile's strong request, Yu Qianqiu roughly told him about Bai Changchun's glorious feat of killing Owl Ji, shocking Immortal Lord Crocodile. When Yu Qianqiu casually mentioned that Bai Changchun had already gone to the Netherworld realm, Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed. There was a hint of admiration in his solemn expression. He didn't think that he had underestimated Bai Changchun's strength. Based on Bai Changchun's ability to defeat two immortal lords and two Netherworld generals, it was obvious that even if his cultivation was at its peak, he wouldn't be Bai Changchun's match. As they flew, Immortal Lord Crocodile also confirmed his guess. Yu Qianqiu's cultivation had indeed reached the soul formation stage. This left Immortal Lord Crocodile speechless. The master and disciple's cultivation speed was too abnormal. After flying out of the vast yellow plains, they immediately entered a primeval forest that stretched as far as the eye could see. The two of them didn't dare to be ostentatious, afraid that they would be discovered. Thus, they tried to fly close to the treetops in the valleys of the mountains. If anything happened, it would be convenient for them to hide. The mountains rose and fell, the green forest was like a wash, and the landscape was like a painting. Along the way, Immortal Lord Crocodile remained vigilant, and Yu Qianqiu also became more interested in enjoying the scenery of the forest. However, just as he was enjoying the view, Immortal Lord Crocodile suddenly pulled him into the dense forest below. As soon as they landed, Yu Qianqiu immediately held his breath and focused. He knew that Immortal Lord Crocodile wouldn't do this for no reason. He must have discovered something. Without another word, he pointed his finger and immediately burrowed into the ground with Immortal Lord Crocodile. The surface of the ground slowly returned to normal as the two of them dove into the ground. It could be said that Yu Qianqiu used the same trick again. The two of them hid under a small slope, revealing two small holes under the luxuriant weeds for the two of them to observe the movements outside. After waiting underground for a while, Yu Qianqiu didn't discover anything. He couldn't help but ask via voice transmission, "Old monster, what did you discover?" In the end, before he could finish speaking, they heard the sound of intense fighting coming from afar. Even the hole that the two of them were hiding in was shaking. Mud and sand fell, covering the two of them with a layer of soil. Such a big movement could be heard from so far away. One could only imagine that the cultivation level of the people fighting was not low. Yu Qianqiu immediately used the earth art to strengthen the soil around them, preventing them from being buried alive. The sounds of the fierce battle lasted for a long time before it died down. After waiting for a while, Yu Qianqiu asked via voice transmission, "Old monster, the fight seems to be over. Can we go out and continue on our way?" Immortal Lord Crocodile suddenly frowned and stretched out his index finger to make a silent gesture. He closed his eyes and listened. Without hesitation, Yu Qianqiu immediately stuck his head against the mud wall, narrowed one eye, and blindly looked out of the hole. He saw the branches and leaves of a few trees in front of him rustling, and a beautiful figure came out and landed directly on the ground. After stumbling and holding onto the tree trunk, she quickly looked around vigilantly. Yu Qianqiu's narrowed eyes instantly lit up. This was a graceful woman dressed in a white palace robe. Her arms were covered by long flowing cloud sleeves, and her hair was a little fluffy. There was a bright red bloodstain on her snow-white chin. Her beautiful appearance was not the slightest bit inferior to Lu Yanqing. Whether it was in terms of temperament or aura, she was even better. She seemed incomparably elegant and noble. She pushed the tree trunk away and staggered a few steps. Suddenly, her eyebrows furrowed slightly, and she looked like she was in pain. Her chest heaved up and down, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. In the blink of an eye, her eyes closed slightly, and she fell to the ground, motionless. It was obvious that she had suffered serious injuries. Yu Qianqiu looked around again. When he looked back, he saw that immortal Lord Crocodile was also staring outside with a serious expression. He immediately felt happy. He thought to himself, "Old thing, why are you pretending to be so serious? I have seen you in the cannibal tribe. You are called a man on the outside." He immediately sent a voice transmission and chuckled. "Old monster, that woman outside is beautiful, right? Are you tempted? Do you want to take the opportunity while she's unconscious to bring her in to take a look at her?" Immortal Lord Crocodile suddenly turned around and stared at him. Just as a cold smile appeared on his face, he suddenly froze and frowned. He hurriedly sent a voice transmission. "Quick, quick, bring her in." Yu Qianqiu winked and smiled. He looked outside and used the earth spell. The woman was instantly swallowed by the wave of earth and sank into the ground. However, in the blink of an eye, more than a dozen streams of light flashed and appeared, all of them full of murderous intent. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He immediately held his breath and did not dare to move. The leader was a burly bald man in black with a fierce look on his face. His bald head was shiny, and he had big eyes without eyebrows. He was looking around with a fierce look in his eyes. After glancing at the blood on the ground, he hooked his index finger, and a bloody leaf fell into his hand. He gently crushed it with his fingers and snorted coldly. He opened his mouth and spoke in an unusually hoarse voice. He waved his hand and said, "That B** is seriously injured. She can't run far. Everyone spread out and search." Immortal Lord Crocodile immediately sent a voice transmission to Yu Qianqiu. "Quickly dive down and hide, or we won't be able to hide from them." Yu Qianqiu naturally knew without the need for him to say anything. Hiding in such a shallow and close distance would not be able to hide from even a soul formation expert, let alone an immortal from the Eastern Holy Land. Moreover, the other party had the intention to search. He immediately used the earth spell to its limit. He grabbed the unconscious woman with one hand and pulled Immortal Lord Crocodile with the other. They quickly dove deep and far away. The movement of the underground soil immediately attracted the gazes of the dozen people to the small slope where the two of them had been hiding. The bald man shouted in a hoarse voice, "Underground!" The dozen people attacked almost at the same time without hesitation. All kinds of dazzling lights shot out from their hands. Bang! There was a deafening sound, as if the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. In an instant, the soil within a radius of nearly 1,000 meters flew everywhere. Countless trees and plants were instantly turned to ash. Amidst the scorched smoke, the dozen people were covered in a layer of transparent protective light shield. Their gazes were like torches as they looked down from the sky. Under their combined attack, a huge vortex-shaped pit with a radius of 1,000 meters appeared in the deep primitive forest. It was charred black and hundreds of meters deep. The dozen people's gazes penetrated the smoke and fog with their perception. They quickly scanned the ground, but they did not find any movement. They looked at each other and at the bald man in black. Their reactions were considered fast. They did not expect someone to be able to escape underground so quickly. It was probably as fast as flying. It was simply unbelievable. The bald man narrowed his eyes and looked down. He said slowly in a deep and hoarse voice, "Earth manipulation art? Could the earth manipulation spell allow him to escape so quickly underground? Could it be that I'm ignorant?" Everyone shook their heads, indicating that they had not heard of it. The bald man snorted coldly. "I have never heard of that woman using the earth element art. Did someone save her?" As soon as he said this, someone immediately cupped his hands and reported, "According to what I know, the city lord of Lust City, Huang Tian, knows the earth manipulation art. Also, Lust City is not far from here." Could it be him? Old man Huang Tian? Just him? The bald man laughed coldly and said, "It's not that I look down on him, but his tricks can only be used by a 3-year-old child to play hide and seek. They can't even be mentioned in the same breath as this kind of earth elemental technique. They are not on the same level at all. Yet, he wants to escape underground with a person?" Chapter 789. I was speaking nonsense. That person cupped his hands, and then he frowned and said, "That's strange. According to my knowledge, Huang Tian was the only one who knew how to control Earth amongst the people who survived all those years ago. Could it be that there's someone else? No matter who he is, since he doesn't dare to fight us head-on, there's no need to be afraid of him." The bald man in black suddenly looked at them and ordered in a hoarse voice, "Gather our people and search with all our might. We must find that B*Tsich before she recovers. Once she recovers, all of us will have to bear the consequences." Everyone bowed and accepted the order, then quickly dispersed. At this time, Yu Qianqiu and the other two were wrapped in a bubble underground. The soil layer in front of them quickly parted, and the soil behind them closed up again. They were like fish in water, or like stray dogs fleeing in panic. Yu Qianqiu held the injured woman with one arm, his eyes closed, and the fingers of his other hand stretched forward, using the earth manipulation technique to quickly open up a path. Immortal Lord Crocodile placed both palms on Yu Qianqiu's back, pushing Yu Qianqiu forward quickly. The two of them could be said to be complementing each other. One of them did not have enough cultivation, but the magical earth manipulation technique could break through the soil and open up a path, while the other used his profound cultivation to act as an engine, pushing Yu Qianqiu at full speed. Even so, there was blood at the corner of their mouths, and their faces were pale. Although the two of them had dodged the joint attack of more than a dozen people and did not hit them head-on, they were too close and could not teleport like they could outside. In addition, the combined power of those people was indeed strong. A strong impact was like hitting a cow across a mountain, quickly injuring the two of them. Fortunately, Yu Qianqiu's reaction was quick, and he instantly used the earth manipulation technique to cause the ground to fluctuate, immediately dissipating a lot of the strong impact. Otherwise, it would have been difficult for them to escape. Even so, the two of them were still seriously injured. "Old monster, stop." Yu Qianqiu suddenly opened his eyes and shouted. Immortal Lord Crocodile quickly stopped. In fact, he had also discovered that along the way, large rocks had appeared all around them. Yu Qianqiu was having some difficulty opening a path. He kept making detours through the mud between the rocks. It looked like he was flying fast, but in fact he was not running far. "Old monster, how far have we run?" Yu Qianqiu asked again. "He should be hundreds of miles away." Immortal Lord Crocodile said. "Pa!" Yu Qianqiu suddenly raised his hand and fiercely slapped the woman's plump buttocks. Immortal Crocodile immediately shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, what are you doing? Damn it. What do you think I'm doing?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the person in his arms and said unhappily, "In order to help you save the damsel in distress, I almost lost my life. Do you still have a problem with me taking advantage of her? Damn it. It feels good." As he spoke, he did not hesitate to pinch her. Immortal Lord Crocodile stared at his actions in shock, then looked at the woman in his arms. The corners of his mouth could not help but twitch. While he was in a daze, Yu Qianqiu had already thrown the woman onto the ground without any mercy. He slowly walked forward with his palm outstretched. The soil parted, and before long, a huge, grayish-white stone appeared from the soil. He pressed his palm on the stone, slightly tilted his head, and closed his eyes silently. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at his strange actions and did not know what he was up to. Suddenly, he saw a faint smile appear on Yu Qianqiu's face. The huge rock that he was pressing on suddenly melted like snow, and a 2-meter-wide stone appeared in front of him, continuously extending inside. Yu Qianqiu put his palm out and closed his eyes as he walked inside. The smile on his face became wider and wider, as if he had discovered something. Immortal Lord Crocodile saw that he could control rocks as easily as he controlled the earth, and was immediately surprised. Without a doubt, this kid must have just comprehended it. Previously, when he encountered rocks, he had to go around in circles. Seeing that he was getting further and further away, Immortal Lord Crocodile suddenly looked around. He did not know how deep underground they were, and he could not lose him, or it would be troublesome to get out. So he hurriedly picked up the woman that Yu Qianqiu had casually thrown to the ground, and quickly followed. After following behind Yu Qianqiu for a few hundred meters, he could not help but ask, "How did you do it?" Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu stopped, opened his eyes, and looked around. He smiled faintly and said, "So it works like this. I'm really a genius." His face was full of pride. When he was escaping underground, he was constantly blocked by rocks and had to go around them, which made him very angry. But at that moment, the scene of extracting metals from ores in his previous life flashed across his mind. With the mentality of giving it a try, he used the metal conjuration art on the rock, and found that there seemed to be a little reaction from the rock, but it was still indifferent. So he tried using the earth art and metal art together, and a miracle happened. He had never thought that using the earth art and metal art together could produce such a miraculous effect, but this was not what made him the happiest. The happiest thing was that he had found another way to use the 5 elemental arts. It turned out that the 5 elemental arts could be used together, which meant that the 5 elemental arts had a lot of potential. Yu Qianqiu reached out and touched the stone wall again, then turned to look at Immortal Lord Crocodile and said, "The back of this stone wall seems to be empty. Could we have found some treasure?" He suddenly thought of the strange experience of finding the Divine Spirit Stone when he first came to the Demon Ghost region. Immortal Lord Crocodile rolled his eyes and said speechlessly, "Dream on. How can it be so easy to find a treasure? Besides, no one would bury something so deep, right? Maybe it's an underground karst cave, we'll know once we open it." Yu Qianqiu nodded and pushed with his palm. The stone wall immediately melted and spread in all directions, and the stone passage quickly extended forward. Suddenly, a light appeared in the darkness a dozen meters ahead, and it was opened. Treasure light? The two looked at each other, and Immortal Lord Crocodile was even more speechless. Could it be that this kid was right, that there was really a treasure here? Without a word, Yu Qianqiu flashed over and stood at the exit at the end of the passage. Immortal Lord Crocodile followed behind, and with just one look he could not help but laugh. In fact, it was not Yu Qianqiu who had guessed right, but he himself who had guessed right. There was no treasure here, and the underground space in front of them was indeed an underground karst cave. The two rushed into the karst cave one after another. There was a pool in front of them, with stalactites of various shapes and sizes on both sides. There were also many stalactites hanging upside down above the cave, with crystal-clear water droplets dripping into the river, making crisp and melodious tinkling sounds. The strangest thing was that there was colorful fluorescent sand everywhere in this karst cave, making the entire karst cave shine brightly. This was also why the two saw the light. "Tsk tisk." Yu Qianqiu stood by the pool and exclaimed. Immortal Lord Crocodile did not know what he saw. He placed the woman in his hands on the ground, walked to the side of the pool, and immediately understood the reason for Yu Qianqiu's surprise. There were living aquatic animals in this pool, and the strange thing was that these aquatic animals' bodies could actually glow. The floating crown-like jellyfish's crown shone with light. The stealth transparent white shrimp's abdomen also shone with blue light. There were also some fish whose heads, tails, or backs glowed with colorful light. They were all very beautiful aquatic animals that lived peacefully in this undisturbed pool. The depths of the pool were pitch black, seemingly bottomless. It was probably connected to an underground river. Immortal Lord Crocodile tilted his head to look at Yu Qianqiu. Seeing him smiling foolishly with blood at the corner of his mouth, he touched his mouth and squatted by the pool to clean himself. Yu Qianqiu glanced at it, then lowered his head to look at his own reflection in the water. He squatted down to wash up as well. When he was done, he turned around and saw that Immortal Lord Crocodile was taking out an immortal pill to feed to the woman. He couldn't help but walk over and tease, "Old monster, did you fall in love with me because I'm pretty? I advise you to think carefully. This woman's cultivation level is not weak, don't save your enemy." Oh, do you know her? Immortal Lord Crocodile nodded silently, indicating that he knew her. He calmed down and helped the woman refine the immortal pill. After a long time, he slowly laid the woman down. After that, he sat down cross-legged at the side and swallowed a celestial pill to heal himself. However, he noticed that Yu Qianqiu was looking at the woman up and down with malicious intent. He frowned and took out the bottle of celestial pills and handed it over. He said, "If you're injured, then stop for a moment and heal yourself first." "I don't need it." Yu Qianqiu subconsciously waved his hand. He stared at the woman lying on the ground and clicked his tongue. "This woman is really beautiful. She's stunning." Immortal Lord Crocodile paused and asked in surprise, "You don't need to heal yourself?" Yu Qianqiu was taken aback. Then he laughed and said, "Medicine is 30% poisonous. I usually resist as much as I can and try not to take medicine." Although he said that, in fact, there was another hidden reason. The Jin Dan in his body was very magical. Every time he was injured, it would immediately play a miraculous effect to help him recover. It was faster than taking any panacea. At this time, it seemed that he had almost recovered. Hearing this, Immortal Lord Crocodile put away the bottle in his hand and closed his eyes to heal himself. "Take your time to heal yourself. I'll go out and see what's going on outside." Yu Qianqiu threw down these words, and in a flash, he rushed out of the hole he came from and quickly rose to the surface. When he sensed the surface, he could not help but click his tongue. It turned out that they had already run thousands of meters underground. Like Du Xingxuan, he quietly poked his head out of the ground and looked around. When he realized that he was still in the forest, he quickly got out of the ground and flashed to a tree. He hid in the dense foliage and looked around. In the end, he was secretly shocked to find that there were people flying quickly in the air around him, as if searching for something. He shrunk his head back and immediately dove headfirst into the ground, disappearing without a trace. When he returned to the underground cave, Immortal Lord Crocodile opened his eyes and looked at him. "What's the situation outside?" Yu Qianqiu shook his head and stared at the woman on the ground, who was still unconscious. "There are people searching everywhere. We can't go out for now. Who is this woman? Why are they mobilizing so many people? It seems like they won't stop until they find her." "Great, I'm afraid we'll have to stay here for a while." Chapter 790. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at the unconscious woman with a serious expression and said in a low voice, "She's badly injured." "You don't have to tell me that, I can tell." Yu Qianqiu squatted down next to him and winked at him. "Oh monster, tell me, who is she? Was she an old flame of yours?" Immortal Lord Crocodile looked over and stared at him, who was smiling mischievously. He sneered. "Who is she? Haven't you guessed it yet? She was once one of the 12 great immortal lords in the celestial world." "Ah." Yu Qianqiu's eyes were slightly confused, and then his smile froze. He seemed to have thought of something and his mouth twitched. He pointed at the unconscious woman and asked weakly, You mean she's Ji Wu?" Immortal Lord Crocodile sat there motionlessly and sneered. "If she's not her, then who do you think she is?" Yu Qianqiu's outstretched hand jerked back as if he had been electrocuted. He said with a stiff expression, "Old monster, don't joke with me. How could she be Ji Wu? With Immortal Lord Ji Wu's strength, who in the East Holy Land would dare to touch her?" He felt a chill down his spine when he thought of how he had just pinched and slapped this woman's butt. "If I'm not wrong..." Immortal Lord Crocodile looked back at the woman on the ground and sighed. "This might have happened because of your master. She was probably severely injured by your master first, and then she fell into their trap. Otherwise, they wouldn't have dared to touch her so easily." "She's really Ji Wu?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. His gaze lingered on the unconscious woman's pretty face. Even though there were bloodstains on her face and she looked haggard, it couldn't hide her cold and aloof temperament. She was clearly someone who had been above others for a long time. Her messy hair was resting on the ground, and her eyebrows were tightly knitted together. There was a hint of anger between her smooth, white brows. Damn it. This woman was clearly not someone to be trifled with. She was still holding a grudge even when she was unconscious. A ruthless expression gradually appeared on Yu Qianzhou's face. His eyes flickered as he stood up and slowly walked towards the unconscious Ji Wu. His every move fell into Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyes. Immortal Lord Crocodile immediately shouted, "Yu Qianzhou, what are you trying to do?" "Nothing." Yu Qianzhou's gaze was deep and indifferent as he said, "While she's down, I'll take her life." Stuff. Lord Crocodile leaped to his feet and stood between the two of them. "Yu Qianzhou, she has no grudge against you, why did you kill her? It's better to nip some things in the bud." Yu Qianzhou narrowed his eyes and said, "If she wakes up and finds out that it was my master who injured her, and what I did just now, based on her abilities, if she goes berserk, I won't be able to handle it. Rather than making such a strong enemy, it's better to kill him first and get rid of future troubles." "Are you crazy?" Immortal Lord Crocodile shouted. "If you don't say and I don't say, who will know that it was your master who injured her? Who will know what you did to her just now?" Yu Qianzhou raised his eyebrows and asked suspiciously, "You really won't say?" "Don't worry. I know what I can say and what I can't," Immortal Lord Crocodile said impatiently. "Then forget it. Pretend I didn't say anything." Yu Qianzhou flung his sleeves and acted as if nothing had happened. He turned around and found a place to sit down. Before Immortal Lord Crocodile could say anything, Yu Qianzhou interrupted. "Old monster, who are those people chasing after Ji Wu?" The anger on Immortal Lord Crocodile's face disappeared. He frowned and snorted. "They should be Yi Zhao's men. That bald man in black is called Rakshasa, and he is an early-stage immortal emperor. He is Yi Zhao's disciple. Rakshasa probably wants to seize power while Ji Wu is injured after Yi Zhao is dead." "From what you said, I think it's possible. If Ji Wu is dead, that bald man might become the boss of the East Holy Land." Yu Qianzhou nodded slowly. As he was thinking about this, he suddenly realized that Immortal Lord Crocodile was taking off his clothes. In the blink of an eye, he was only left with his underwear. Yu Qianzhou's mouth opened wide. He looked at the unconscious Ji Wu, then at the almost naked and muscular Immortal Lord Crocodile. He said in surprise, "Old monster, you don't have to be so anxious when you see your lover." As he said that, he quickly got up and waved his hand. "I don't like to watch live performances. I'll go back in 4 hours. Is that enough?" Immortal Lord Crocodile snorted and could not be bothered with him. He knew that whenever this kid was free, the more he bothered with him, the more trouble he would cause. He flung his long hair, and his braids were instantly untied. He took out a yellow pill and walked to the side of the pool. He crushed the yellow pill into powder with his palms and mixed it with the pool water. He began to rub it on his hair and face, and bit by bit, his whole body. Soon, his whole body looked like it was covered in black paste. Immortal Lord Crocodile dived into the pool, and the clear pool water instantly turned murky. When he walked out of the pool again, his body had recovered to its original fair complexion. He turned around, and water splashed everywhere. Suddenly his body was wrapped in a layer of white light. When the white light disappeared, he was already dressed in a silver robe. With his long silver hair draped over his shoulders, the dignified Immortal Lord Crocodile appeared again. Yu Qianzhou looked at him with a disgusted expression, a naughty smile on his face. Immortal Lord Crocodile's hair stood on end. He took out another yellow pill from his storage bracelet and threw it to him. "You should recover too." Yu Qianzhou caught the yellow pill and looked at it. He put it away and said, "I'll stay like this for now. It's more convenient when I'm in the Holy East Lands." Immortal Lord Crocodile was stunned. He looked at himself and did not say anything. He walked to the side and sat on the ground. Yu Qianzhou looked at him, then at the unconscious Ji Wu on the ground. He finally could not help but snicker. "Old monster, I really couldn't tell. You're quite mindful of your image in front of a beautiful woman." Immortal Lord Crocodile was not afraid of his mockery. He said calmly, "Of course. Although my cultivation is not as good as before, I was one of the 12 great immortal lords with her. There's no reason for her to look down on me. There are always setbacks in life. When one is down and out, one does not catch the eye of one's acquaintances. He will rise again in the future. It's human nature. I understand. Yu Qianqiu did not continue to provoke him. He tilted his head to look at the unconscious Ji Wu. When will she wake up? It should be about time. Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head slightly. When she wakes up, she will be able to take care of herself. She will recover quickly. As he spoke, he suddenly frowned and flashed to Ji Wu's side. Yu Qianqiu looked over. Ji Wu's eyebrows moved slightly, and her eyes slowly opened. Perhaps because she suddenly realized that there were people beside her, and her subconscious was still in the pursuit, she was on high alert. She disappeared on the spot and flashed into the air. Her long cloud sleeves fluttered, and her white clothes fluttered. She looked like a fairy descending. Her bright eyes flashed, and she said sternly, "Who are you?" As soon as she said that, she frowned and covered her abdomen with one hand. A trace of blood seeped from the corner of her mouth. Her expression was one of pain. She was obviously seriously injured. Immortal Lord Crocodile immediately raised his hand and shouted, "Sister Ji Wu, you have not recovered from your injuries. Don't be rash. Look carefully. Don't you recognize me?" Ji Wu's body trembled, and she slowly raised her head. Her bright eyes fell on Immortal Lord Crocodile, revealing an expression of disbelief. After looking at him repeatedly, she confirmed that it was true. She immediately floated to Immortal Lord Crocodile's side like a fairy. She said hoarsely, "Brother Crocodile, you are still alive? But your cultivation, how weren't you killed by the Thousand Swords Demon Lord?" Immortal Lord Crocodile suddenly raised his head and laughed loudly, causing the cave to tremble. His laughter was full of sorrow. After a long time, he replied firmly, "I was killed by the Thousand Swords Demon Lord. Unfortunately, I was lucky and I was not killed. I was suppressed for more than 100,000 years." As he spoke, he waved his hand and patted Yu Qianqiu's shoulder. Yu Qianqiu's body tilted and his eyes rolled back. He sighed and said, "Thanks to this little brother, I was able to escape and see the light of day again." Yu Qianqiu pushed Immortal Lord Crocodile's hand away and tried to stand up straight. He smiled at Ji Wu and nodded kindly. Then, he said to Immortal Lord Crocodile in a graceful manner, "It's not worth mentioning, not worth mentioning. It's my duty, my duty. I am a person who loves to help others." Ji Wu glanced at him and ignored him. Then, she looked at herself and said happily, "Could it be that Brother Crocodile saved me at the critical moment?" Yu Qianqiu still maintained a smile on his face, but in his heart he regretted not slapping her a few more times. Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head and patted Yu Qianqiu's shoulder again. He said, "What a coincidence. You and I were both saved by him. Don't you think this is God's will?" "He was the one who saved me?" Ji Wu was startled. Only then did she re-examine Yu Qianqiu. She immediately discovered that she couldn't see through his cultivation. Immediately she was shocked. She shook her sleeves and wrapped them around her arms. She bowed slightly and said, "Ji Wu thanks you for saving my life. May I know who you are?" "You flatter me, you flatter me." Yu Qianqiu's hands were like flowers. He smiled and said, "It's my duty, my duty. I am born to help others." Immortal Lord Crocodile waved his hand to stop her. "Sister, don't bother with him. This kid has a glib tongue and is full of nonsense. He is only a soul formation cultivator. It was just a coincidence that he saved you. He is not a master." Then he frowned and asked, "Why did Luo Sha want to kill you?" Ji Wu looked suspiciously at Yu Qianqiu, who was embarrassed. She immediately told Immortal Lord Crocodile about how Bai Changchun started a massacre in the Immortal City and how she was chased. It was just as Immortal Lord Crocodile had guessed. After being injured by Bai Changchun, she was ambushed by Luo Sha and the others while she was recuperating. That was why she ended up like this. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Yu Qianqiu meaningfully. It seemed to be saying, "Your master injured her, and you saved her. Your merits and demerits offset each other. Don't expect her to owe you a favor." In fact, Yu Qianqiu did not intend for Ji Wu to owe him a favor. Instead, he was worried that immortal Lord Crocodile would expose the fact that his master was by Changchun. He still hoped that Jiwu would tell him where the purple flames were. It would be best if there was no conflict. Chapter 791. When the two old friends met, they naturally talked about many things. Their savior, Yu Qianqiu, was completely ignored. Yu Qianqiu didn't think much of it. He listened quietly at the side. He could tell that these two had a good relationship back in the immortal world. After chatting for a while, they talked about how they were being hunted. Ji Wu immediately gritted her teeth and said, "I won't let those Rakshasa people off." In a fit of anger, she covered her abdomen with her hand again, and a trace of blood seeped out of the corner of her mouth. According to her, she almost never interfered with anything in the East Holy Land. This mainland was basically ruled by Yi Shao. She had always been hiding in the West Palace. If it wasn't for Bai Changchun causing havoc in the Immortal City and Yi Shao asking her for help, she wouldn't even have shown herself. However, she had never imagined that she, who had always stood aloof from worldly affairs, would be regarded as a stumbling block by the disciples of the Night Owl sect after she was injured, and they would launch a sneak attack on her. This was also the reason why she was so angry. Immortal Crocodile immediately raised his hand to comfort her. "Sister, don't worry. It won't be too late to take revenge after you recover. They won't be able to escape from the Heaven and Earth Universe array." As he spoke, he took out a bottle of pills and handed it over. "I was overjoyed to see Sister. I spoke too much and almost delayed Sister's recovery. If there's anything, it won't be too late to talk about it after you've recovered." Ji Wu took over the bottle and poured out an immortal pill that was shrouded in a purple mist. For a moment, the entire karst cave was filled with a strange aroma that could refresh one's mind. Ji Wu looked at the elixir in her palm and smiled bitterly. Everyone has been sealed by the Heaven and Earth Jianquan array for so many years. Everything that needs to be used has been used up. Fortunately, we met Brother Crocodile. Otherwise, I don't know how long it would take for my little sister to recover. Immortal Lord Crocodile smiled bitterly and said, "I'd rather use up all these things than be suppressed for 100,000 years and have my cultivation level greatly reduced. I don't know how long it will take for me to recover. But that's good too. I can finally put it to good use today. To be able to help Sister, it's worth being trapped for so many years." Saying so, he suddenly exclaimed, "Sister, don't you have a golden fur immortal ape? Why don't I see him? Could he have been killed by Luosha and the others?" Yu Qianqiu's ears perked up. Ji Wu shook her head and smiled bitterly. "That's not it. Brother Crocodile, you might not know this, but the Heaven and Earth Universe array is really strange." After the last battle with the Thousand Swords Demon King, the immortal beasts and spirit beasts that we brought from the immortal world all showed abnormalities after a few years. The Heaven and Earth Universe array seemed to be absorbing the spiritual energy in their bodies. As a result, those immortal beasts and spirit beasts withered year by year. In the end, not a single one of them could last for 30,000 years, and all of them died. "I see." Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed slightly. Yu Qianqiu, who was at the side, seemed to have thought of something. He immediately sent a telepathic message, "Old monster, ask him what's going on with the fence meat." This had always been a mystery in his heart. Immortal Lord Crocodile glanced at him and changed the topic. Ji Wu frowned slightly and said, "Other than mining, the main reason why those warriors came was because Yi Shao had obtained a scroll of magic left behind by the demon Dao. It was said that it could break the Heaven and Earth Universe array's seal, but it needed strong men to refine it. No one knew how many people had died in the experiment. More than 200 years ago, the Night Owl had successfully sent a disciple out. However, after that disciple went out, there was no news of him. No one knew whether he was dead or alive. Originally, after this fence meet, Yi Shao was going to try it himself. Who knew that a lunatic would suddenly appear and ruin Yi Zhao's dream? More than 200 years ago? Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He finally understood where the immortal that the old man killed in the East Sea more than 200 years ago came from. He had never figured it out. It turned out that the immortal had escaped from the Heaven and Earth Universe array. However, that person was too unlucky. He could have met anyone in the human world, but he actually met the top expert in the world. It was not an ordinary kind of bad life. He escaped from the heaven and earth universe array, but he was killed. Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head and smiled bitterly. So what if he got out? I'm afraid that person will not be able to return to the celestial world. Ji Woo was startled and said, Brother Crocodile, why do you say that? Did something happen outside? Immortal Lord Crocodile glanced at Yu Qianqiu, but Yu Qianqiu knew what he was going to say. He kept signaling him with his eyes, trying to persuade him not to say it. After hesitating for a while, Immortal Lord Crocodile said, Yu Qianqiu, you don't have to worry. I believe that Sister Ji Woo is not that kind of person. Yu Qianqiu wanted to tell him that one could not know a person's heart, but he knew that anything he said now would be fake. Ji Woo looked at the two of them with a puzzled expression. She did not know what the two of them were talking about. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Ji Woo and said, The immortal ascension stage in the human world has been set up with the soul transformation smoke. With Yi Zhao's cultivation, even if he wanted to return to the celestial world through the netherworld realm, it would be difficult for him to pass through the netherworld realm. That's why I said it would be difficult for him to return to the celestial world. Ji Woo squeezed the immortal pill in her hand, her eyes flashing. After a moment of hesitation, she asked, Brother Crocodile, how do you know that the immortal ascension stage has been set up with the soul transformation smoke? Immortal Lord Crocodile explained, To tell you the truth, I have a way to enter and exit the heaven and earth universe array. I have been to the immortal ascension stage once and saw the soul transformation smoke set up with my own eyes. What? Ji Woo exclaimed. Brother Crocodile can enter and exit the heaven and earth universe array? To her, the soul transformation smoke was no longer important. The most unbelievable thing was that Immortal Lord Crocodile could enter and exit the heaven and earth universe array. Damn it. They say that heroes have a weakness for the charms of a beautiful woman. I thought it was referring to people like me. I didn't expect demons to have a weakness for beauties too. Yu Qianqiu cursed silently. Immortal Lord Crocodile nodded slightly. He waved his hand and slapped Yu Qianqiu again. His eyes rolled and he sighed. Don't underestimate him. Although his cultivation level is not high, his master is not to be underestimated. His master, Old Demon, you can't burn bridges after crossing the river. Yu Qianqiu swatted away the arm that was slapping his shoulder and roared crazily. This time he was really angry. He did not expect Immortal Lord Crocodile to reveal all his secrets. But you don't want to find the purple fire anymore? Immortal Lord Crocodile asked calmly. Do? Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched. He pointed at Immortal Lord Crocodile and sneered. You win. If you don't take my words seriously, then we'll see who is more ruthless. Immortal Lord Crocodile paused. He remembered that he did promise not to say anything. In addition, he still needed Ji Woo's help to leave the heaven and earth universe array. He immediately turned and said, Sister Ji Woo, let me ask you something. You have been here for many years. Do you know where the purple fire that supports the heaven and earth universe array is hidden? Purple fire? Ji Woo paused. Seeing that Immortal Lord Crocodile had changed the topic, she knew that he would not say anything more. However, thinking that even Immortal Lord Crocodile said that Yu Qianqiu's master was not to be underestimated, she did not dare to underestimate Yu Qianqiu. She stared at Yu Qianqiu seriously and said, Why are you looking for the purple fire? No one can go near that place. Sister, don't say any more. Immortal Lord Crocodile waved his hand to stop her from continuing. He asked, When we first fought the Myriad Swords Demon Lord, I remember that you saved Silver Armor Soldier's life. Silver Armor Soldier gave you a token, saying that if you encountered any trouble in the netherworld, you could ask him for help. If the two of us break into the netherworld, are you confident that you can get the Silver Armored Army to escort us back to the immortal world? Ji Woo's bright eyes immediately flashed with extraordinary splendor. She seemed very excited. She never dreamed that there would be a day when she could escape the cage of the heaven and earth formation. After he calmed down a little, he seemed a little hesitant and said, There is such a thing, but the Emperor of the Underworld has never been too fond of the people of the immortal world. I'm afraid that even the Silver Armor Army may not be able to make this decision." Immortal Lord Crocodile nodded with approval. If Ji Woo had agreed immediately, he might have been skeptical about what would happen next. But now, it seemed that Ji Woo was still the same Ji Woo from back then. He immediately laughed and said, "You don't have to worry about this. I have dealt with the Silver Armored Army a few times. He is a man who values friendship and is also the commander of the Emperor of the Underworld's guards. He is highly regarded by the Emperor of the Underworld. As long as he is willing to help, the chances of the Emperor of the Underworld not giving him face are very small. He will definitely help him return this favor." He turned to look at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Yu Qianqiu, I believed you at first when you said that you could help me recover my cultivation. But after thinking about it, I really felt that it was a little unreliable. Let's not talk about the past. Now that I have met Sister Ji Woo, I have hope of returning to the immortal world. Please help me. As long as you send us out of the heaven and earth formation, I will ask Sister Ji Woo to tell you where the purple flames are. It is much better than asking around blindly and taking great risks." Then he secretly transmitted his voice. "Don't worry, I won't tell anyone the secret of you collecting the purple flames to cultivate the Samadhi true fire. This is mainly because of your master, who is worthy of my respect. Besides, I might as well warn you in advance that you may be able to collect the purple flames, but if you want to fuse them into the Samadhi true fire, I'm afraid your current cultivation is far from enough. You'd better take care of yourself." Damn it. He was indeed a shrewd old man. He had been deceived by his silly appearance. At the crucial moment he was playing tricks on him. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He should have thought of this earlier. How could a person ranked among the 12 great immortal monarchs of the immortal world be simple? He was just pretending to be ignorant. "Tell me, where is the purple flames?" Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth and said. Ji Woo could obviously see that there seemed to be a story between the two. She looked at Immortal Crocodile inquiringly, asking if he should tell her. Immortal Crocodile pondered for a moment and said, "Yu Qianqiu, don't misunderstand and don't overthink it. I have absolutely no ill intentions towards you. Similarly, I trust you." He then turned to Ji Woo and nodded. "Tell him first." Ji Woo looked up and down at Yu Qianqiu with a somewhat curious gaze. She slowly said, "In the easternmost region of this continent, there's a barren wasteland where not even a blade of grass grows. Someone once saw traces of purple flames there. Why don't you go there and take a look?" Chapter 792. The Easternmost Land? Yu Qianqiu was surprised. In the easternmost part of this continent? Ji Woo nodded slightly to confirm. Yu Qianqiu thought for a while and asked, "Do you have a specific location? The easternmost land is too big. Can you be more specific?" "I can't be more specific. No one knows the specific location because no one can go deep into it. In addition, rumor has it that the purple fire appears and disappears randomly. You can't see it unless it's by chance. Those who have seen it before are purely coincidental. So, I can't tell you the specific location," Ji Woo explained. Immortal Lord Crocodile nodded. "That depends on your luck." Yu Qianqiu was silent for a long time before he raised his head to look at the two. His gaze landed on Immortal Lord Crocodile and he slowly said, "Old monster, I can bring the two of you out of the heaven and earth universe formation, but you have to promise me that you will not stay in the human world." Before he finished, Immortal Lord Crocodile waved his hand indifferently. "You worry too much. You don't have to worry about that. It's meaningless for us to stay in the human world. Once we're out of the heaven and earth universe formation, we'll go straight to the netherworld and return to the celestial world. From then on, if fate allows it, we'll meet again in the celestial world." "Alright," Yu Qianqiu said firmly. "I believe you. I hope you're not lying to me. Otherwise, I'll send you off now." "Wait." Ji Woo stretched out her arms and said with a hint of anger in between her brows, "Now is not the time to leave. Wait until I recover and kill those Rakshasa people. We can't just let them go like this." Those who could make it to the celestial world's 12 great immortal lords were indeed not to be trifled with. Beauties were no exception. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Ji Wu and thought. Immortal Lord Crocodile frowned and said, "Sister Ji Wu, I have something to say, but I don't know if I should say it." Ji Wu was startled. She seemed to have guessed what Immortal Crocodile was going to say. Her eyes flickered and she bit her lip. She bowed slightly and said, "Brother Crocodile, if you have something to say, just say it. I will listen." "Sister, it is indeed important to recover from your injuries first. But revenge?" Immortal Lord Crocodile hesitated for a while and said slowly, "In my opinion, if you really want revenge, don't you think trapping the Rakshasa and the others here forever is the greatest revenge? Besides, I'm worried that things might change if we delay. Of course, I'm just saying. You can make the decision yourself." Ji Wu bit her lip. She seemed to have made up her mind and said, "Sister, listen to Brother Crocodile. Give me 3 days to heal." Immortal Crocodile nodded in satisfaction. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Wait for us for 3 days. Bring us out of the heaven and earth Qian Kun array 3 days later. How about that?" "Sure," Yu Qianqiu agreed. He walked to the side and sat down with his eyes closed. He looked calm on the surface, but he felt that he had agreed too rashly. However, there was nothing he could do. With their cultivation levels, he could not do anything to them. Immortal Lord Crocodile must have known that. If he didn't agree, Ji Wu's injuries would heal sooner or later. Once she recovered, with her cultivation level, the Holy East Land would be her world, and it would be very difficult for him to have the chance to collect the purple flames again. Ji Wu also swallowed the immortal pill and immediately sat down cross-legged to heal her injuries. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at the two of them and sat down cross-legged in between them. Inside the cave, the sun and the moon did not know. To them, time was like a flash of light in the cave. 3 days in the cave passed quickly. Yu Qianqiu's heart was not at peace during these 3 days. He kept thinking of countermeasures in case something unexpected happened. In less than 3 days, Ji Wu was the first to stand up, feeling refreshed. Immortal Lord Crocodile opened his eyes and smiled. "Sister, how do you feel?" Ji Wu bowed and said, "It's all thanks to Big Brother Crocodile's elixir. Otherwise, I would not have recovered so quickly. Let me freshen up first, then I will leave the Heaven and Earth Universe formation with Big Brother Crocodile." After saying that, she turned and walked to the pool. She did not even take off her clothes. The pool water slowly submerged her. The water rippled, and there was a white figure dancing under the water. Damn it. How could she bathe like this without taking off her clothes? Yu Qianqiu was speechless and a little disappointed. However, when the beauty came out of the water again, Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. Ji Wu slowly walked out of the water. Her long hair was wet, and her skin was smooth. She had washed away the blood on her body. Water droplets dripped from her cold, pretty face. She was like a thorny rose in the morning, enduring the dew. Coupled with the sunlight in the cave, it was really tempting. She raised her hands high and tied her long hair into a bun again. The palace gauze wrapped around her body, accentuating her exquisite curves. However, good things did not last long. As soon as Ji Wu walked to the shore, a white mist rose from her body. As the mist dissipated, the hibiscus out of the water instantly returned to her cold and dignified appearance. She seemed to notice that someone was looking at her. She stared at him coldly with a murderous look. Yu Qianqiu shivered and immediately turned his head to the side awkwardly. He saw Immortal Lord Crocodile staring at him with a sneer. It seemed to be saying, "I don't even dare to look at you. You're really brave." Yu Qianqiu coughed and stood up. He glanced at the two of them and said indifferently, "Can the two of you leave now?" Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Ji Wu inquiringly. Ji Wu nodded. He also stood up and explained to Ji Wu, he's going to use a magical teleportation array. He'll need the girl's cooperation later. "Close your eyes first," he told Ji Wu what Yu Qianqiu had told him. The latter frowned slightly and muttered softly, "Teleportation array?" Although she did not understand, she trusted Immortal Lord Crocodile and nodded in agreement. "Everyone, stand closer." Yu Qianqiu put on an act and called the two of them to his side. Then he threw a few small silver balls at them. Then he formed hand seals and muttered something. Ji Wu looked at Immortal Lord Crocodile in confusion. Seeing that he had already closed his eyes, she hesitated for a moment and closed her eyes as well. In the blink of an eye, Ji Wu heard a shrill wind in her ears. The temperature dropped a lot. She noticed that her surroundings seemed to have changed. Her eyes moved under her eyelids. She wanted to open her eyes to take a look, but she did not dare to take the risk. In the end, she held back. Yu Qianqiu looked around and smiled at the two of them. Okay, we're here. The two of them opened their eyes at the same time, only to see that their surroundings were dark and gloomy, and the chilly wind was howling. In front of them was a gloomy and terrifying cave with its mouth wide open, like a monster opening its mouth and roaring. The strong chilly wind was blowing out from that cave. Immortal Lord Crocodile and Ji Wu looked at each other. The latter cried out, "Ninth Netherworld Cave." Ji Wu was in disbelief. She took a few steps forward and stood at the edge of the cliff. She stared at the cave opposite and said in a trembling voice, "It's really the Ninth Netherworld Cave." She turned back and said excitedly, "Big Brother Crocodile, am I dreaming? This is the Ninth Netherworld Cave. I'm really out of the Heaven and Earth universe formation. Is this real?" Immortal Lord Crocodile smiled and nodded. He turned to Yu Qianqiu and said, "Thank you. We will keep your secret. We will never tell anyone about it. I hope we will meet again in the immortal world." He stretched out his hand and said, "Give me a storage bag." "What for?" Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously, but he still took out a storage bag and handed it to Immortal Lord Crocodile. After Immortal Monarch Crocodile received the interspatial pouch, he immediately took out a bunch of shiny black things from his storage bracelet and put them into the interspatial pouch. Yu Qianqiu's eyes widened in shock, and his heart thumped wildly. Divine Grade Spirit Stones. Is it for me? Sure enough, Immortal Monarch Crocodile handed it back to Huang Xiaolong with a smile. "I don't have anything to thank you with, but I can see that you like spirit stones. Here are 200 million Divine Grade Spirit Stones. Take it as our thanks for your help." With a beauty by my side, I have to be polite. Yu Qianqiu's heart itched, but he pretended to be serious and grabbed the storage bag tightly. He pretended to decline. "You're too polite. We helped each other, and it's just a small favor. There's no need to be so polite." Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at his hand that was clutching the storage bag tightly. He shook his head and laughed. If you can successfully return to the immortal world with little sister Ji Wu, with her cultivation, these spirit stones are nothing. If you can't return smoothly, it's a waste to keep these spirit stones. You should just accept them." He let go of the storage bag. Since you've put it this way, I won't be unreasonable." Yu Qianqiu quickly stuffed the storage bag into his robe and touched his chest. A smile bloomed on his face. Suddenly, his eyes turned, and he took out a small silver ball. He pretended to inject a few spells into it, then grabbed Immortal Lord Crocodile's hand and stuffed it into his palm. Immortal Lord Crocodile was stunned. He was very familiar with this thing. He asked, "What do you mean?" "That." Yu Qianqiu sighed. "As you said, I hope we'll have a chance to meet in the immortal world. If you can successfully pass through the netherworld and return to the immortal world, you can scatter this small silver ball somewhere in the immortal world. If I really have a chance to go to the immortal world, I'll be able to sense it. At least I'll know that you've arrived safely. If possible, I might go find you, old monster, to reminisce about old times. Do you welcome me?" Immortal Lord Crocodile paused, then immediately laughed. "Okay, it's a deal. We'll meet again in the immortal world if there's a chance." He put the silver ball in his hand into his bracelet. Yu Qianqiu took 2 steps back and cupped his hands at the two. "I wish the two of you a smooth journey and a safe return to the immortal world. Please." He raised his hand and gestured to the entrance of the 9th Netherworld Cave. Immortal Lord Crocodile and Ji Wu looked at each other. The latter nodded slightly at Yu Qianqiu to express his gratitude. Then, they turned into 2 rays of white light and flashed into the 9th Netherworld Cave. Yu Qianqiu stood on the cliff, facing the chilly wind blowing out of the cave expressionlessly. He seemed to be waiting for something. After a long time, the ninth netherworld cave suddenly spewed out a strong, ink-black chilly wind. The howling of the wind was mournful. After a while, it slowly calmed down. He slowly heaved a sigh of relief. The change in the ninth netherworld cave just now meant that someone had opened the gate to the netherworld and finally sent these two great gods away. Chapter 793. Although Immortal Crocodile did not do anything wrong, Yu Qianqiu still felt that Immortal Crocodile was the one who pretended to be a pig to eat a tiger. Thinking of this, he wanted to give Immortal Crocodile a few more silver balls and ask him to help him throw some into the netherworld, but he was afraid of arousing Immortal Crocodile's suspicions, so he held back in the end. After being distracted for a while, he turned around and saw Yu Ji and the others from the Evil Wind Valley bowing to him. Obviously, they were attracted by the changes in the ninth netherworld cave. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand expressionlessly and said, "There's nothing else, disperse." After saying that, he disappeared. When he reappeared, he was back in the karst cave where he had stayed before. He looked around and found that he was the only one left, so he was a little disappointed. Then, he seemed to have thought of something and snickered again. He looked at his palm and sighed, "Even in the immortal world, who has ever touched immortal monarch dancing G's but? I have touched it, hee." Amidst the laughter, he took off his clothes and changed into the almost naked fur clothes of the cannibals. Then he carried a spear, flashed into the cave wall, and quickly rose to the surface. After reaching the surface, he poked his head out and looked around. Seeing that there was nothing unusual, he climbed out of the ground. After determining the direction to the east, he carried his spear and flew through the forest at a moderate speed. Along the way, he hunted a few wild pheasants, tied his legs, and carried the spear on his shoulder. Swinging his braids, he continued to hurry on his way. He looked valiant and heroic, as well as romantic and elegant. However, the movement in the sky was too big, and there were people flying over every few days. He had no choice but to stop and use his feet to cross the mountains. Whenever this happened, he could always feel that someone was spying on him. With his impenetrable cultivation and realistic disguise, he was lucky enough to pass. In the end, he realized that this method was stupid and too dangerous. Why didn't he use the earth element method? He identified the direction and sank hundreds of meters underground, using the earth art to fly quickly. Along the way, when he encountered rocks blocking his way, he would immediately use the earth and metal arts at the same time. When he encountered the obstruction of an underground river, he would immediately switch to the water arts. It could be said that his journey underground was unimpeded. Other than popping his head out from time to check if he had gone in the wrong direction, he basically buried his head in the pitch-black underground. He even thought that even Earth Traveler's son of the Divine Seal Decree might not have been as awesome as he was. While he was lost in his thoughts, Yu Qianqiu, who was speeding underground, suddenly came to an emergency stop. He used the earth spell to sense and confirm again. He frowned and muttered, "It's empty in front. Is it another underground cave?" He slowly moved forward and drilled into a stone wall. After moving forward for about 10 meters, he felt that he had reached the edge of the space in front of him. He quietly stuck his head out to take a look and was shocked. He quickly retracted his head. Who would build a hole hundreds of meters underground? Yu Qianqiu was bewildered. He thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, so he stuck his head out of the green stone wall to take a closer look. This time, he was certain that it was indeed an underground palace. Moreover, it was a very grand underground palace. The interior of the palace was filled with an ancient and thick, eerie and terrifying aura. There were some fluorites embedded in the surroundings, but there weren't many of them. The dim lighting made the palace even more eerie and terrifying. In a moment of curiosity, Yu Qianqiu carried a spear on his shoulder and a few wild pheasants on it. He tiptoed out from the stone wall. He carefully looked around, focusing on the dark passage that connected to the palace. He couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief when he discovered that there wasn't a single person. There wasn't a single chair in the palace. It was completely empty and spotless. There was only a high platform in the center that had steps leading up to it. On the high platform, there was a pentagonal platform. There was a stone carving on the stone wall behind the platform. It seemed to be the back view of a scholar writing in front of a writing desk. The carving was very lifelike, but the face couldn't be seen. It seemed mysterious and strange. Yu Qianqiu was getting more and more curious. Why would the stone carving on the main seat use the back view of a scholar as the main character? What was the meaning of this? Could it be that this scholar had some unusual meaning? He looked at the stone walls on his left and right, and was attracted by the stone carvings on the walls on both sides. On both sides, there were 6 men wearing mighty battle armor. Their faces were lifelike, but they were all different. However, each of them had an extraordinary aura. There were a total of 12 people on both sides. All of them were facing the portrait of the scholar's back on the stone wall, as if they were in awe of the scholar, giving the impression that they were all the scholar's subordinates. Could it be that this was an underground palace used for sacrificial ceremonies? Who would dig a palace several hundred meters underground? Yu Qianqiu carried a spear with a few wild pheasants on it. He stood in the main hall and rubbed his chin. Suddenly, his body trembled. He looked at the 12 armored statues on both sides in a daze. He suddenly remembered that there was a group of practitioners from the underworld in the Eastern Holy Land. It was said that they lived in the underground world. Could this underground palace be the 12 underworld generals of the underworld? Could they be the 12 underworld generals of the underworld? Yu Qianqiu stared at the stone carving of the scholar on the main seat on the high platform. He gasped and mumbled to himself, could it be that this scholar is the legendary emperor of the underworld? How could the emperor of the underworld be a scholar? That's right. He is the emperor of the underworld, the ruler of the underworld. A woman's voice rang out behind him. Yu Qianqiu was startled. He turned around hastily and accidentally threw the few dead wild pheasants on the spear far away. He saw a woman in black clothes with half of her face covered by a black veil. She had long hair that reached her shoulders. Other than the black veil on her face, she had no other accessories on her body. Although she looked like a living person, the deathly energy on her body was even heavier than that of Yu Ji of the chilly Wind Valley. She was looking at him curiously. For you. Yu Qianqiu held the spear with both hands and pointed it at her. His action seemed a bit childish. The mysterious woman glanced at the wild pheasant that had fallen to the ground, then looked at Yu Qianqiu's almost naked attire, and a stunned expression appeared on her face as she asked in a puzzled voice, "Are you a native from another tribe?" Then she reacted and said with a frown, "It's impossible. How could a native of the outside world break into this place?" For you. Yu Qianqiu had calmed down and was ready to leave at any time. He put away the spear and walked over to pick up the wild pheasants he had thrown aside. He put the pheasants on the spear and put them on his shoulder again. He looked at her and sneered, "You don't dare to show your true face. Where did you come from? How dare you break into this place?" "I broke into this place?" The woman paused and said, "This is the sacred hall I built myself. I am the underworld saintess appointed by His Majesty the Emperor of the underworld. How could I be a female thief?" Yu Qianqiu was startled when he heard this. He didn't expect that this woman would tell him all her secrets just by asking casually. Why did he feel that she was a bit stupid? With a tentative attitude, he asked, "The underworld saintess? How come I have never heard of it? What does the underworld saintess do?" "Preside over all the important ceremonies of the underworld," the mysterious woman asked rhetorically. "You don't even know this?" "I think I have heard of it," Yu Qianqiu said disapprovingly. He relaxed his vigilance a little. He had already evaluated this so-called underworld saintess as an idiot 80%. But he still didn't dare to underestimate her. He was afraid that he would run into another person who pretended to be a pig to eat a tiger. "Who are you? How could you enter the sacred hall?" the underworld saintess asked. "What's so strange about that?" Yu Qianqiu pointed at the passageway behind her and said, "Of course I walked in from there. Otherwise, where do you think I came in from?" "Impossible." The underworld saintess shook her head and said, "Unless there is some important ceremony, even the 12 netherworld generals under the emperor of the underworld wouldn't dare to break into this place." "Are you serious?" Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and asked suspiciously, if that's the case, your status in the underworld is even higher than the 12 netherworld generals? Your cultivation level is also higher than theirs? My cultivation level isn't as high as theirs, but they are very respectful to me and have always protected me, the underworld saintess said calmly. Have always protected you? Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, why did I hear that the 2 netherworld generals here have already been killed? How can they still protect you? That's because they have completed their mission. I no longer need their protection. This is also their destiny. The underworld saintess spoke slowly and then walked over gracefully. Yu Qianqiu quickly dodged to the side. However, he saw that she had no intention of doing anything to him. Instead, she silently walked past him and walked up the stairs to the high platform. Yu Qianqiu realized that this woman didn't make any sound as she walked. It was no wonder that he didn't know she was behind him. She walked to the back of the pentagonal platform and faced the bottom. She nodded slightly at Yu Qianqiu and said, come up. What? Yu Qianqiu asked casually. However, this woman's words and actions always gave off a gentle and harmless vibe, causing people to involuntarily let down their guard. He thought for a moment and followed her instructions. He carefully walked up the stairs with the long spear in his hand. When he walked up to the high platform, he realized that the pentagonal platform was actually a sand table. It was filled with fine black sand. The underworld saintess stretched out her pale hand from her black sleeves and picked up a thin silver stick from the sand table. She gently swept the surface of the sand table until it was flat. Then she said to Yu Qianqiu, use your left hand to press a handprint on the sand table. What? Yu Qianqiu asked again. However, he still shifted the spear from his left shoulder to his right shoulder. He stared at the underworld saintess without moving his eyes. He was afraid that she would play tricks on him. However, he was staring at his left palm from the corner of his eyes as he gently pressed it on the black sand table. However, just as his palm pressed on the sand table, he suddenly felt an inexplicable restlessness in his heart. He felt strange. Why did he have to do as she said? He immediately rubbed his palm and erased the handprint on the sand table. He stared at the underworld saintess and sneered, why should I listen to you? Chapter 794. The netherworld saintess didn't answer. Her gaze was calm as she stretched out her pale right hand and slowly pressed it on the black sand table. Although the originally flat sand table had been messed up by Yu Qianqiu, she still accurately found the position where Yu Qianqiu pressed his palm. The position where their palms pressed overlapped. Yu Qianqiu looked at her suspiciously. He didn't know what this so-called netherworld saintess was doing. Although he didn't know what the face under the black veil looked like, judging from the delicate outline of the upper half of her face, her appearance shouldn't be too bad. Under her brows that were like distant mountains, her eyes were slightly closed, revealing a faint puzzled expression. The netherworld saintess opened her eyes and withdrew her pale palm from the sand table. She stared at Yu Qianqiu and asked curiously, why is it like this? What? Yu Qianqiu's gaze swept over the sand table, but he couldn't see anything. He expressed his suspicions and asked, what are you doing? The netherworld saintess swept the sand table with her silver rod again, and then gently placed it on the sand table. A silver line was immediately inlaid on the fine black sand. The two colors were very conspicuous, suddenly giving people a mysterious and shocking feeling. Yu Qianqiu's heart thumped. He felt that something was strange and quickly looked away. The netherworld saintess looked at him with a serene and peaceful gaze. It was filled with a purity that stood aloof from worldly affairs, and also seemed to contain the light of wisdom that could see through everything. After carefully sizing up Yu Qianqiu, the black veil revealed a strange tone and said, your life should have ended long ago, but why are you still alive and well? What a strange fate, even I can't see through it. What are you babbling about? You, the netherworld saintess, can't be a witch, right? Yu Qianqiu sneered. Suddenly, the smile on his face froze, and the corner of his mouth twitched. He suddenly thought of something from the sentence, your life should have ended long ago. Whether it was him in his previous life or this body in this life, As the Netherworld Saintess said, his life should have ended long ago. The other party's words made him feel as if he was sitting on pins and needles. He coughed and asked tentatively, "I say, Saintess, do you know how to read fortunes?" The Netherworld Saintess suddenly fell into silence. Her clear eyes suddenly turned pitch black, as if there were stars swimming in them. Yu Qianqiu was immediately startled, and he looked at her nervously. After a long time, her eyes finally returned to normal. She looked at him quietly and said, "You are a variable. I can't figure out your fate. I can't predict your fate. The two Netherworld generals who protected me have fallen. It seems that I will not be too long before I return." Yu Qianqiu was tickled by her mysterious words. He scratched his head and asked again, "You really know how to read fortunes?" "I don't know how to read fortunes, but I try to understand the fate of others. It is my honor to be able to understand the fate of others," the Netherworld Saintess said calmly. When she said this, he could actually feel a sense of piety and holiness from her body. She really had the demeanor of a master of metaphysics. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. The more humble a person was, the more he believed that they were truly capable. He casually threw the spear on his shoulder along with a few hard pheasants off the stage. He rubbed his hands excitedly and respectfully and asked for guidance. "Respected Saintess, my life is long and full of confusion. Please understand my fate. Let me know how I should walk in the future, so that I can make as few mistakes as possible." The Netherworld Saintess quietly shook her head and said, "Your fate is full of variables, and I can't understand it. Even if I can understand the fate of others, I won't tell anyone. Otherwise, I will change the fate of others, and that will be my sin. I will lose the ability to understand the fate of others. Don't force me. Even the Emperor of the Underworld never forces me." Having said that, she turned around and bowed to the sculpture of the Emperor of the Underworld on the stone wall with her arms folded. Then she walked around the pentagonal stage and walked down the stairs. Yu Qianqiu followed her obediently and said, "I won't let you tell anyone about it. You can just point me in the right direction and let me use it as a reference. I don't think it's too much to ask of you, right?" The Netherworld Saintess walked slowly toward the passage, ignoring him. Yu Qianqiu said, "Hey," a few times. Finally, he couldn't help but say angrily, "I think you are a liar. You obviously don't know anything, but you still pretend to be profound." The Netherworld Saintess, who was near the entrance of the passage, suddenly turned around and stared at him. Goading her worked. Yu Qianqiu stopped, his expression stiff. "It's easy to prove that you are not a liar. You can calculate how many wives I will have in the future, how high my cultivation will be, and how long my lifespan will be." He asked a series of questions in one breath, because he guessed that this woman might be someone with great ability. Otherwise, how could she be appointed as the Netherworld Saintess by the Emperor of the Underworld? Moreover, she was easy to talk to and didn't have a bad temper. He wouldn't miss such an opportunity. "Yu Qianqiu, I can't help you. You should leave the way you came. Don't follow me anymore. The people outside the Divine Hall won't be as polite to you as I am to you." Having said that, the Netherworld Saintess turned around and left. Yu Qianqiu was immediately dumbstruck. From the moment he had entered, he had never mentioned his name. Yet, the other party had actually called out his name. Yu Qianqiu suddenly shouted at the departing figure, "Since you already know my name, what's your name? I don't know where I come from. I don't know what my name is, and I don't know who I am. Maybe I don't even have a name. From the moment I woke up, the Emperor of the Underworld told me that I came from the endless darkness, and that I am the Netherworld Saintess. From that moment on, they all called me the Netherworld Saintess, so I am the Netherworld Saintess. I don't have a name. I am the Netherworld Saintess, and the Netherworld Saintess is me." As the figure of the Netherworld Saintess disappeared into the depths of the long tunnel, the voice also faded away. Yu Qianqiu stood alone in the dim underground sacred hall for a while. He wanted to go out with the Netherworld Saintess, but he didn't dare to. Just as the Netherworld Saintess had said, the meditation practitioners outside would not be polite to an intruder like him. Looking around the holy palace once more, he suddenly felt as if he was dreaming. He had suddenly appeared here, and then a woman who claimed to be the underworld saintess had suddenly appeared. After a baffling conversation, he felt as if it was all very surreal. It was as if the two of them were destined to meet here for a short period of time. He calmed himself down and stopped thinking about it. It was more important to do his own things. Yuchincho's gaze fell on the things he had thrown away. He walked over and skewered a wild pheasant with his long spear and carried it on his shoulder again. Suddenly, he began to walk in the footsteps of a Beijing opera. He pointed his finger at the wall in front of him. His eyes were wide open as he shouted, "Look at the dark hole in front of us. It must be the thieves' lair. Wait for me to catch up and kill them all." He rushed into the wall and disappeared. It was lonely to travel alone in the dark underground. Moreover, the speed underground was not as fast as flying in the sky, so he could only find ways to relieve his boredom. A few days later, he suddenly felt that the surrounding soil was getting harder and harder, and the surrounding temperature was getting higher and higher. Feeling curious, he came out of the ground to check, and to make sure that he had not deviated from the direction he was walking. A head suddenly popped out of a vast and desolate Gobi desert. The head was full of small braids, and it was looking around. This was a very wide desert, and there were no obstacles in sight. The sky was high, the clouds were clear, and the sun was bright and clear. Yuchincho directly jumped out of the ground and breathed in the fresh air. He had been so bored underground for the past few days. This place was spacious enough. Although it was easy to be discovered by others, it was also easy for him to discover others, which was good for escaping. Now, he felt sick at the thought of going underground. The excitement he had when he had mastered the Earth formula had already faded away in the past few days. Anyone who went underground and had to see rats and earthworms running around in fear would not be able to feel happy. He carried the long spear and swayed for a while, but he did not find any signs of anyone flying in the sky. The surroundings were also desolate. Other than the grayish-brown gravel, there was no sign of life. Not even a blade of grass. Such signs might have something to do with the high temperature here, which was abnormal. But it was also to his liking. It was better if there was no one. He put away the spear and flew freely in the vast Gobi desert. He did not encounter any obstacles along the way, but the temperature was getting higher and higher. It was so high that it was scary. If he did not cultivate the fire formula, he was afraid that he would not be able to withstand it for long, no matter how high his cultivation was. As far as Chu Tian's eyes could see, a hazy gray shadow suddenly appeared on the Gobi desert. When he got closer, he discovered that it was a continuous range of mountains. Once he flew above the mountains, he suddenly felt that he could not bear it, and landed on a bare mountaintop. The mountains in front of him were all bare. Animals and plants could not possibly survive under such high temperature. Yuchincho looked around, and his face showed some surprise. He really could not understand. Logically speaking, he cultivated the fire formula, so he should not be afraid of high temperature. But he actually faintly felt that he could not bear it. He looked in front of him. Judging from the feelings he had felt along the way, the temperature there should be even higher. He did not dare to go forward, afraid that he, a person who cultivated the fire formula, would be roasted. In the midst of his fear and hesitation, a pleasantly surprised expression suddenly appeared on his face. He quickly looked around, as if he was looking for something. Think about it, not to mention the temperature of ordinary fire, he was not even afraid of the tyrannical high temperature of the blue fire. Then what kind of high temperature in this world could deter him? Without a doubt, other than the legendary purple fire that ranked first in the true Samadhi fire, he really could not think of anything else that could have a higher temperature. Chapter 795. Thinking of this, his excitement overcame his fear of the high temperature. He gritted his teeth and continued to fly forward. He firmly believed that the place with the highest temperature was the place where the purple flames were most likely to appear, so he was looking for trouble. However, after flying for several kilometers, he felt that he could no longer fly. The temperature in front of him was simply too high, so high that it was frightening. He used the fire art to resist the high temperature, but he was still tormented by the high temperature. He fell from the sky in a sickly state, panting heavily as he looked around, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. This godforsaken place was even more fiery than the flaming mountain in Journey to the West. It was probably comparable to Taishang Laojuan's 8 trigrams furnace. He did not know how that furry monkey managed to survive. It seemed like the legendary Samadhi true fire was used to refine Sun Wukong. Damn it! All hail Sun Wukong! Yu Qianqiu stood at the top of the mountain and took a deep breath. He immediately realized that the air around him was filled with the smell of sparks. He uprooted a large tree from Utopia and casually waved it out. As soon as it left the protection of his fire art, it immediately ignited with a buzz. The fire instantly became ferocious, and the tree that was filled with water instantly turned into ashes and scattered, leaving him speechless. Without a doubt, this was the easternmost land that Ji Wu had mentioned. No wonder she said that no one could go deep. Even he who cultivated the fire art could not endure it. No matter how high the cultivation of others was, it would probably be difficult. The sun was blazing in the sky, and the ground was thousands of times hotter than the sun. Yu Qianqiu felt like he was a bun in a steamer that was about to be cooked. However, looking around, the mountains rose and fell, and the world was vast. He could not see a single trace of the purple flames. He really could not stay any longer. If he did, he would definitely die, let alone go deeper. Yu Qianqiu immediately took out a small silver ball and prepared to leave. However, as soon as he threw the small silver ball, it turned into a pool of mercury before it even hit the ground. He was stunned for a moment, but immediately realized that the temperature was too high. Left with no choice, he found the small porcelain bottle that he had prepared in the past and gently placed it on the ground. As soon as it left his hand, the small porcelain bottle immediately turned into a grayish-brown color. Cracks appeared on its surface and it shattered into several pieces. The corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched. He took out a large lump of nether iron and tried again. However, the moment he let it go, the nether iron instantly emitted black smoke and turned into black water, dyeing the ground black. Your grandfather, you can't expect me to retreat outside and come back in again, right? Yu Qianqiu cursed as he pointed at his surroundings. In the end, Bai Changchun decided to go all out. He took out a storage bracelet and took out treasures one by one and threw them out. These were the treasures Bai Changchun had obtained when he killed Jin Miao and the others in the cannibal tribe. He wanted to see what kind of treasures could withstand such high temperatures. The result left him dumbfounded. All the treasures he had thrown out had turned into liquid metal. Yu Qianqiu was completely speechless. These were all treasures from the immortal world. The power of these purple flames was simply too terrifying. He had not even seen the purple flames yet, but the heat they emitted was already so terrifying. Speechless, he gritted his teeth and took out Jin Miao's defensive treasure, the golden umbrella. Once the golden umbrella was taken out, it immediately shone with golden light. What made him overjoyed was that it was indeed a treasure personally bestowed by the immortal emperor. It could actually withstand such terrifying heat. Damn, it really is a good treasure. Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding in the golden light under the umbrella, was extremely cocky. Under the protection of the golden umbrella, the temperature inside and outside were worlds apart. Without a word, he immediately flew up with a big umbrella that shone with golden light. He hid under the umbrella and looked around contentedly, hoping to find traces of the purple flames. He was dressed almost completely naked, but he was flying with an umbrella. The way he was dressed was extraordinarily avant-garde. However, not long after, he realized that something was wrong. It seemed like the protective golden light emitted by the golden umbrella was a little chaotic and was shining dimly. Yu Qianqiu also felt the heat coming from the handle of the umbrella. Not good, this golden umbrella was powerful, but it could only last for a limited time. If he persisted any longer, this good treasure would be destroyed. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly landed and looked around anxiously. He had to find a way to leave a teleportation coordinate, or he would have to repeat the journey here indefinitely. After hesitating for a while, the golden umbrella had already begun to turn red, like a red-hot soldering iron. In his panic, Yu Qianzhou's eyes suddenly lit up. He remembered the scene when Immortal Crocodile had used the divine sword to kill Jin Miao. The power of the divine sword could not even be blocked by the golden umbrella, so it was naturally more powerful than the golden umbrella. Moreover, the divine sword had absorbed his blood essence, so it was a good item to use as a teleportation coordinate. At this thought, he saw that the golden umbrella was about to collapse. He did not dare to hesitate anymore. The divine sword flashed quickly and stabbed into the ground with a swoosh. Yu Qianzhou directly carried the umbrella and disappeared on the spot. Lady Mu was meditating under a tall magnolia tree on Obedient Island in the demonic ghost domain when she suddenly heard the sound of something falling into the water, followed by a strange splash. When she opened her eyes, she immediately saw intense white smoke rising from the lake beside Obedient Island. It was a vast expanse of whiteness. Lady Mu teleported over with an angry look on her face. She was just about to rebuke the newcomer when she heard Yu Qianzhou's comfortable moans coming from the boundless white mist. She couldn't help but be startled. When the white fog rose and disappeared, she saw a shirtless Yu Qianzhou playing around in the lake with a golden umbrella. After the temperature had completely cooled down, Yu Qianzhou quickly flashed to Obedient Island and took out the golden umbrella again. The golden light from the umbrella's rim once again wrapped him up. Seeing that the treasure was not damaged, Yu Qianzhou finally heaved a sigh of relief and put away the golden umbrella. When he saw Miss Mu, who was looking at him with a surprised expression, he turned his hand and summoned a water dragon from the 1,000-mile lake. The meandering water shot over and instantly froze into a large block of ice that was several meters wide. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and said, "Hurry up and send some fresh fruits over. I almost died from the heat." After saying that, he directly flashed into the big house and lay down on the mat on the ground, enjoying the cool shade. He still had a lingering fear of the terrifyingly high temperature in that damned place. After some time, Lady Mu smilingly came in with a plate of all kinds of fresh fruits. The plate was even sprinkled with crushed ice to cool it down. The fragrance of the cold fruits was refreshing. Yu Qianzhou got up and grabbed the fruits on the plate and chewed on them. He even swallowed a few pieces of ice. A chill rose from his stomach and he finally got rid of his fear of the high temperature. Just as he burped, he suddenly thought of the godly sword. He wondered if he could still withstand the heat after such a long time. Could it be like the golden umbrella, which could only withstand the heat for a while? Thinking of this, he suddenly became nervous. That was a good treasure. Please don't destroy it. He immediately disappeared from the big house. When he reappeared in that desolate and uninhabited place, Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and the godly sword sprang up from the ground and landed in his hand. He touched it everywhere and couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. The godly sword was indeed a godly sword. It was actually immune to high temperature. Even after such a long time, it was still as cold as an unsheathed sword. He finally heaved a sigh of relief and relaxed. Looking around, he enlarged the godly sword in his hand and held it in his arms to cool himself down. He then flew into the sky again and continued to search for traces of the purple flames in this barren land. When the high temperature was too much for him to bear, he once again took out the golden umbrella to resist for a period of time. When the golden umbrella could no longer withstand it, he immediately stabbed the godly sword into the ground and returned to Obedient Island with the golden umbrella to cool himself down again. After going back and forth like this for a long time, it was finally night time. As soon as night fell, Yu Qianzhou immediately became spirited. He thought that as long as the purple flames appeared, they would definitely shine. Night was the best time to find the purple flames. Under the starry sky, Yu Qianzhou, who had been tossing and turning in this barren land until the middle of the night, was not discouraged. It seemed that he would not give up until he found the purple flames. Under the repeated torture of the high temperature, his mental state was quite dispirited. However, he still forced himself to persevere in his search. This persisted for a few days. Whether it was the consumption of his mental state or the consumption of his true essence, it was extremely huge. At times like this fellow's commendable fighting spirit would come out and he would forcefully stuff a large amount of elixirs into his stomach to persevere. He firmly believed that as long as he put in the effort he would be rewarded, Lady Mu did not know what he was doing, but she found that every time he came back, his condition would worsen. When she saw him eating elixirs as if they were his meals, she could not help but be secretly worried. Another 10 or so days passed. Yu Qianqiu, who had searched this barren land for thousands of miles, began to feel disappointed. Could it be that the purple flames could only be seen by those who were fated? And that he was not fated to see the purple flames? Or was it that the method he was searching for had gone astray? Or was there no purple flames here at all? After some reflection, he firmly believed that the abnormality of this place proved that there were purple flames here. As for whether it was fated or not, it could not compare to the word diligence. Diligence represented success, and diligence represented fate. The only thing he needed to reflect on now was that the method he was searching for was definitely wrong, and he had gone astray. Under the bright starry sky, the terrifyingly high temperature did not decrease in the slightest. Yu Qianqiu looked around and frowned as he pondered. Purple flames, what kind of form did they take? Several people, including that rotten crow, had told him that the purple flames were the source of power that supported the operation of this world. They were infinitely powerful, and it was difficult for those who were not fated to see them. Could it be that the purple flames were originally scattered, and would only be seen when they were relatively concentrated? This thought flashed through his mind, and immediately caused his body to tremble. He suddenly turned around and looked around this barren land that spanned thousands of miles. The light in his eyes grew brighter and brighter. Suddenly, he faced the boundless wilderness and raised his arms, shouting, I know where you are, I finally found you. Chapter 796. After going through countless hardships and connecting all the clues together, at this moment he suddenly understood. The reason why the purple flame could appear and disappear so mysteriously, making it so difficult for people to see it, was not because it could turn invisible, but because it could split into many parts, making it impossible for people to see it with the naked eye. Since he had determined that there were purple flames here, then this must be the eye of the heaven and earth formation. But why couldn't he see the purple flames? He now completely understood that it was not that he couldn't see the purple flames, but because the purple flames had split into parts and were scattered throughout the eye of the formation. No wonder he could smell sparks in the air when he first came in. He was actually in the world of purple flames, but he was looking for them everywhere. How could he find them? This must be what they meant by being in this mountain. He had gone down the wrong path from the beginning. He should not have used the fire technique to resist the high temperature here. In the end, he had suffered so much for nothing. The scorching heat was getting more and more unbearable, causing Yu Qianqiu to quickly wake up from his thoughts. He calmly swept his gaze across his surroundings. He stabbed the divine sword into the ground and sat cross-legged confidently on the mountain peak. The fire technique began to give up on resisting the high temperature and instead boldly absorbed the fire elements hidden in the air. His train of thought was not wrong, but he had forgotten the most important point. He was currently in the space of purple flames. Giving up on resisting the high temperature was tantamount to suicide. Just like how he had collected the green and black flames, he had collected them near them. If he had rashly barged in, he would have died as well. His impulsive decision immediately caused him to taste the bitter consequences. The moment he gave up on resisting the high temperature, an endless pain, as if his body was being burned by raging flames, struck the deepest part of his soul. Before he could scream, he had lost all his senses and collapsed. Almost at this moment, a dazzling golden light erupted from his abdomen at the fastest speed, protecting him and quickly dispersing the endless heat around him. When a cool feeling spread from his dantian to his limbs and bones, he slowly woke up. The moment he opened his eyes, he immediately realized that he had done something stupid. When he got up, he was surprised to find that the high temperature around him did not dare to approach him. What was going on? His gaze fell on the divine sword in front of him, and his eyes immediately brightened. Could it be that the divine sword had displayed a miraculous effect to protect him? The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was true. Suddenly, he felt that the high temperature around him was approaching again after he woke up. Not daring to hesitate any longer, he quickly sat down cross-legged and pushed the circulation of his fire art to the limit. Something strange happened. Just as he was about to activate the incantation to absorb the heat, the surrounding heat that was about to approach him seemed to have seen some kind of terrifying monster. They quickly dispersed, wanting to get as far away as possible. No matter how hard Yu Qianqiu tried to absorb, they would not come over even if they were beaten to death. It was as if they knew that once he absorbed them, they would become his vassals and puppets. In the blink of an eye, the temperature around Yu Qianqiu plummeted. F***ck. Yu Qianqiu opened his eyes and cursed. He looked around and quickly released his qi to lock on to a ball of high temperature in the air. Using a method similar to the absorbing stars technique, he forcefully absorbed the little sprites that were invisible to the naked eye into his body. After the things were absorbed into his body, Yu Qianqiu was 100% sure that what he had absorbed was indeed the elemental body of the purple fire. However, he found that the purple little sprites were 1,000 times more delicate than the black and blue fire elements. No wonder it was difficult to discover them after they were scattered. So that was the reason. Some of the purple little sprites were like prisoners that had been suppressed. They had been resisting stubbornly and seemed to be very unconvinced. However, after being escorted to his dantian, they immediately became excited when they saw the red fire attribute crystal bead that was operating. They took the initiative to rush over and circled around the red crystal bead twice, as if they were discussing something with the red crystal bead. When the red crystal bead agreed, the little fellows all rushed into the red crystal bead. Just as the purple fire elements entered, the red crystal bead immediately erupted with red light, illuminating the entire dantian. Yu Qianqiu was still secretly amused. Suddenly, he found that his dantian seemed to be summoning something. The purple fire elements that were hiding from him began to circle above his body. Gradually, they gathered in the sky and formed a purple cloud pillar. Then they rushed over in a frenzy. Following the circulation of the fire art, it quickly drilled into every pore of his body and gathered in his meridians, forming a purple wave that rushed into his dantian. It desperately drilled into the sparkling red crystal bead. It was a lively scene. At this time, Yu Qianqiu was sitting quietly on the peak of the mountain. The purple cloud circled above his head. The scene was extremely spectacular. What outsiders did not know was that the temperature around him at this time was simply terrifying to the extreme. It was likely that nothing could come close. The body of the divine sword that was inserted in front of him began to show a dark golden light. It seemed to be protecting itself from the damage of the high temperature. As the purple fire elements surged into the red crystal bead, the volume of the red crystal bead actually slowly increased until it was twice the size of the other beads. Only then did the purple fire elements stop surging in. With the exit cut off, the other purple fire elements quickly rushed towards the walls of his dantian and filled every cell in his limbs and bones. The purple cloud above Yu Qianqiu's head became more and more vigorous. It seemed that because he was here absorbing the purple fire elements from all directions crazily surged towards him. Suddenly, the weather between heaven and earth changed. It became dark and gloomy. With the appearance of a bolt of lightning, the purple cloud ignited with a boom. A purple sea of fire suddenly appeared in the sky. The raging purple sea of fire covered the sky and covered the earth. Between heaven and earth, there was a purple light. It was a spectacular sight. At this time, Yu Qianqiu's absorption of the purple fire elements was already saturated. He stopped absorbing and slowly stood up to look at the purple fire wonder in the sky. At the same time he stopped absorbing, the purple sea of fire in the sky began to move. It seemed to be melting and gradually formed 108 dazzling purple fireballs. They slowly arranged themselves into a strange three-dimensional formation, like a pyramid. The 36 fireballs in the upper half were larger, and the 72 fireballs in the lower half were smaller. This strange formation quietly floated in the air without moving. High up in the sky, the dark clouds were densely packed with lightning snakes, constantly swimming. Yu Qianqiu stared at the formation above his head in a daze. He waited for a long time, but it did not spread. For a moment, he felt an itch to try and see if he could control the 108 purple fireballs above him after absorbing the purple fire. He raised his hand to the sky and locked onto a purple fireball at the foot of the formation. He used the fire art and successfully plucked the purple fireball from the formation. It slowly floated towards him. However, not long after the purple fireball left the formation, the entire formation suddenly trembled, as if it had lost its balance. The remaining 107 fireballs in the blink of an eye began to sway and fall into a mess. F***ck. Yu Qianqiu cried out in shock. He instinctively felt that he had caused some trouble. He desperately tried to put the purple fireball he had plucked back into its original position, but the formation had already collapsed. Nothing could be done. At the instant the formation was in chaos, thunder boomed in the dark clouds high up in the sky. The entire ground seemed to be shaking. On Xianxin Island outside the East Holy Land, Patriarch Nanming teleported to the peak of the mountain. His eyes flickered as he stared at the pitch-black sky above the East Holy Land. Thunder boomed there, and he did not know what was about to happen. At this moment, he suddenly felt a tremor beneath his feet. When he turned around, he immediately realized that the entire Xianxin Island was shaking. The towering boulders on the mountain collapsed and rolled into the sea. Above the sea, there was already a strong gale and huge waves that reached the sky. The volcano on Xianxin Island, which had been silent for countless years, began to emit black smoke. It seemed like it was about to erupt. Patriarch Nanming was shocked. He immediately gathered his true essence and shouted at all the disciples of Xianxin Island, "All disciples of Xianxin Island, listen up. Leave the island immediately. All disciples of Xianxin Island, listen up. Leave the island immediately." Patriarch Nanming's voice covered the entire Xianxin Island. The panicking disciples on the island immediately flew away when they heard his voice. There were probably more than 1,000 of them. Just as Patriarch Nanming flashed into the sky, the volcano on Xianxin Island finally erupted with a boom. The gushing lava instantly engulfed the disciples who could not escape in time. Screams filled the air, and the volcanic ash covered the sky like a dark cloud. As the smoke and dust billowed, Xianxin Island below rumbled again. This time, it did not spew lava again. Instead, it collapsed. A huge red dragon spread its wings and carried Patriarch Nanming down from the volcanic ash in the sky to the surging sea. It flapped its wings and hovered in the air. Patriarch Nanming's eyes were filled with sorrow as he watched Xianxin Island collapse and sink into the sea. What Patriarch Nanming did not know was that it was not only his Xianxin Island that sank. The 108 islands surrounding the East Holy Land, including Xianxin Island, had all collapsed and sunk into the vast sea. The largest city in the East Holy Land was the Celestial City. At this moment, all the celestial cultivators had flown outside and were watching the huge change in the sky with bewilderment. The sky was dark and thunder rumbled. No one knew what was happening. The meditation cultivators in the underground world also felt the huge change in the world. The underground space was collapsing one after another, and the meditation cultivators all dodged. The underworld saintess stood alone in the underground sacred hall. Although she felt the strong tremors, she was not alarmed. She silently watched the wall carvings on the high platform and the back of the emperor of the underworld. At this moment, for meditation cultivators with profound cultivation teleported over. Usually, they would not dare to do this, but today's incident was too sudden, so they could not care less. They bowed in unison, and the leader said anxiously, "The world has changed. It is too dangerous to stay underground. We swear to protect the Saintess to the surface to temporarily hide. Saintess, please leave with us quickly." The underworld Saintess folded her arms and bowed to the wall carvings of the Emperor of the Underworld calmly. She then turned to face the four anxious people and said slowly, "Pass down my order. Everyone is to gather and prepare to return to the underworld. The great formation of heaven and earth is about to be broken." Chapter 797. When the four of them heard this, they were stunned. They all thought that they had heard wrongly and looked at each other inquisitively. When the netherworld saintess quietly passed by the four of them, she said again, "The Eastern Holy Land is about to be broken. Everyone, gather. It's time to return to the netherworld." The four of them were instantly shocked and revealed expressions of indescribable joy. The words of others might be false, but to them, the saintess' words were absolutely not false. They immediately bowed and said, "Understood." Then, two of them followed beside the netherworld saintess to protect her, while the other two quickly went to pass on the order. Yuqiancho stared dumbfoundedly at the huge change between heaven and earth. He saw the 108 purple fireballs floating in the air move chaotically, as if they were being pulled by an invisible rope. They wanted to break free, but were pulled back by each other. However, because the weather was already chaotic, the invisible rope's power seemed to be limited. With a thunderous boom, the invisible rope finally broke. The 108 purple fireballs quickly rushed into the sky and condensed into a ball. The light gradually extinguished, turning back into purple mist and merging with the dark clouds in the sky. After the purple mist merged with the dark clouds, it immediately began to rain heavily. The pitter-patter was so rapid that it wantonly watered this vast, desolate land. The barren hills in the desolate desert were instantly covered in mist. The high temperature that had persisted for who knew how many years had finally started to cool down. Perhaps after a few years, this place would become verdant and full of life. Who knew if there would be people thanking a certain person who had caused a great disaster at that time? The heavy downpour continued for an entire day, completely lowering the high temperature below. At this time, the lightning and thunder in the dark clouds began to die down. Then, a violent wind blew, and the dark clouds that filled the sky began to drift in all directions. Not long after, the world began to gradually regain its clarity, as if nothing had happened. Only the sudden change in temperature told of the huge change that had just occurred. Yuqiancho stood on the mountain peak like a drowned rat, completely dumbfounded. If he hadn't guessed wrong, he should have destroyed the formation eye of the heaven and earth formation. If I'm not wrong, the heaven and earth great array should have been broken by me. What he didn't know was that the so-called heaven and earth great array of heaven and earth contained the Tao of heaven and earth. Once the great array was set up, it would immediately absorb the power of heaven and earth to support the operation of the great array. The absorbed origin energy was converted into the 36 heavenly spirits and 72 earthly fiends to form the core of the formation. If one did not know the method to break this formation, it would be almost impossible to break it with brute force, unless one had the strength to destroy the entire planet. Yuqiancho's absorption of the purple fire elements had more or less destroyed the balance of the formation. As a result, the eye of the formation had appeared and was adjusting the balance of power on its own. But he had actually plucked away one of the fireballs that represented the 72 earthly fiends, completely destroying the balance of the eye of the formation. The 36 celestial dippers and 72 earthly fiends were in chaos, and the formation eye was destroyed by him. With the formation eye destroyed, the formation was naturally broken by him. The Myriad Swords Demon Lord, who had set up this formation back then, probably never would have thought that the heaven and earth great array could actually be broken by someone like this. On the tallest building in the immortal city, the Rakshasa, who had already become the actual owner of this place, led a group of people and looked at the dispersing dark clouds in the sky. Everyone felt a little baffled. They did not know why there was thunder and earth quaking. At that moment, a group of meditation cultivators suddenly appeared in the sky. They formed a group and hurried west. The Rakshasa frowned and shouted angrily with a hoarse voice, "Someone go and ask what exactly is going on." A person behind him quickly caught up to the group of meditation cultivators. After asking around, he quickly flew back and said with cupped hands, "Sky. Sky." From the looks of it, he seemed to be so agitated that he did not know what to say. Slap. The Rakshasa immediately gave him a big slap and made him spin around. He shouted angrily, "Sky, what sky? Tell me, what exactly is going on?" That person immediately woke up from the slap, but the agitation on his face did not disperse. He cupped his hands again and reported, "The netherworld cultivators said that the heaven and earth great array has been broken." They want us to quickly return to the celestial world and not be trapped here anymore. Nonsense. Don't you have a brain? The Rakshasa shouted angrily and gave him another big slap. This slap was much heavier than the previous one. That person almost fell to the ground on the spot. After that person stumbled, he finally could not be agitated anymore. He covered his face and said with a sobbing tone, "It's true. They really said that. When I was flying just now, I also realized that the heaven and earth great array will not extract the celestial essence in my body anymore." The group of people looked at each other. The Rakshasa suddenly looked up into the sky and turned into a stream of light, shooting straight up into the sky. To his surprise, the heaven and earth great array was really broken. The height that he could not fly at because of the restriction of the great array before was now unimpeded. Moreover, there was no phenomenon of the celestial essence in his body being extracted again. However, after being pleasantly surprised for a while, his face instantly turned pale and he felt a chill down his spine. The Rakshasa suddenly thought of immortal Lord Jiwu whom he had ambushed and injured. The reason why he ambushed immortal Lord Jiwu was because he did not want to be restrained by others in this world. That was why he made a desperate move. Who knew that she would still escape? Now that the heaven and earth great array was broken, everyone had to return to the celestial world. Ambushing immortal Lord Jiwu was equivalent to doing nothing. The worst thing was that Jiwu was still not found. If the heaven and earth great array was not broken, everyone would listen to him and there would still be a chance to find immortal Lord Jiwu. But now that the great array was broken, who would be willing to stay in the human world to help him chase after Jiwu? In addition, Jiwu could now escape to a wider range, so the chance of finding her was even slimmer. He now regretted, really regretted. If he had known that the heaven and earth great array would suddenly collapse, he would definitely not have done that. Now that his master, Yishao, was dead, he would not have any backing even if he returned to the celestial world. It was impossible for him to defeat Jiwu. In a flash, a ruthless expression flashed across his face. He had already made up his mind that the most important thing now was to return to the celestial world as soon as possible and find a reliable backing at all costs. That way, he would not have to fear Jiwu's revenge. After making up his mind, he quickly turned into a stream of light and returned upstairs. With a smile on his face, he looked around at the crowd and said in a hoarse voice, "Everyone, the heaven and earth great array is indeed broken. We can successfully return to the celestial world." Hearing that, the group of people upstairs immediately cheered. But at this moment, someone suddenly asked, "Then what about immortal Lord Jiwu?" This was like a basin of cold water splashing on everyone's head. Everyone was immediately dumbfounded. Almost everyone present had participated in the pursuit of Jiwu. Rakshasa immediately waved his hand and laughed in a hoarse voice. "Everyone, don't panic. I already have a countermeasure. Jiwu is not the only immortal lord in the celestial world. As long as we are united, I believe any immortal lord will be willing to accept us with such a huge force. By then, why would we need to be afraid of Jiwu?" The person who asked the question nodded slightly. "That's right. As long as we are united, Jiwu will not be able to do anything to us." Everyone looked at each other and nodded silently. They felt that what he said made sense. "Everyone." Rakshasa waved his arm and said, "There's no time to lose. Everyone, quickly pack what you can and inform those who need to be informed. In half a day, we will return to the celestial world together." "Yes." Everyone responded excitedly. On the top of the mountain, Yu Qianqiu, who had come back to his senses, looked around in a daze. Then, he checked the condition of his body. He was shocked when he saw it. Inside his dantian, 8 more nascent souls appeared silently. A total of 10 nascent souls with the same appearance sat cross-legged in a circle. All 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls appeared. Isn't this the peak of the soul formation final stage? Could it be that my cultivation directly broke through to the peak of the soul formation final stage? Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. He carefully checked the condition of his body again. In the end, he couldn't help but let out a breath of cold air. he found that his cultivation had indeed broken through to the peak of the soul formation final stage. He was only one step away from becoming a celestial expert. Feeling the surging power in his body that he had never felt before, Yu Qianqiu frowned and fell into deep thought. He felt that it was a bit strange. Why didn't he use a single spirit stone to break through? Apart from absorbing the purple flames, he didn't do anything else. Could it be that the purple flames played a role? That's right, it must be the powerful power contained in the purple flames. His guess was right. The purple flames were the symbol of the matured origin energy of heaven and earth. The powerful power contained in it was not something that spirit stones could compare to. After he absorbed the purple flames, the boundless power immediately felt restricted. Thus, the purple flames changed his cultivation to suit it. In the end, it gave him a huge advantage. It was a pity that he didn't know how to use it. Otherwise, he could use the power of the purple flames to forge an immortal body and become a celestial expert. He missed an opportunity for nothing. Sometimes, gains and losses were determined by fate. He had already taken a huge advantage. If he was too greedy, he might end up empty-handed. Ha! At this moment, Yu Qianqiu was laughing wildly with excitement. This trip was too worth it. Not only did he obtain the purple flames, but he also increased his cultivation to the peak of the soul formation final stage. The hardships he suffered before were too worth it. Fortunately, he gritted his teeth and persevered without giving up. Otherwise, he would definitely regret it to death. Halfway through his wild laughter, his smile suddenly froze. He suddenly looked into the distance. He thought of a big problem. Once the heaven and earth great formation of heaven and earth was broken, wouldn't all the experts from the netherworld and immortal realms who were trapped inside be freed? Once they flooded the human world, who could stop them? Damn it. The human world is my territory. No one is allowed to mess around. If you anger me, I'll use you to test the power of the purple flames. Yu Qianqiu's face flashed with ferocity. He immediately disappeared from where he was standing. Once he returned to Obedient Island, Yu Qianqiu quietly stood beside the 1,000-mile lake. He held a shining white mirror in his hand. It was as if he was holding up a bright moon. The scene that appeared in the mirror was the scene at the entrance of the 9 Netherworld cave in the Wind Valley. Chapter 798. Lady Mu stood quietly behind him. She could feel that her master's mental state was very good this time. He no longer had the fatigue of being tortured. His brows, in particular, seemed to be full of confidence. However, she could also see the seriousness in his eyes. It seemed that something big was about to happen. She had seen Bai Changchun use the mirror in Yu Qianqiu's hand. In fact, she wanted to see what could be seen in the mirror, but without Yu Qianqiu's permission, she didn't dare to peep. Otherwise, once she violated the taboo, the consequences were not something she could bear. Yu Qianqiu didn't smile cheekily anymore. She also stood behind silently with her head down. The mirror in Yu Qianqiu's hand was called the Heaven's Eye Mirror. It meant that it was the eye of the heavens. It could watch everything quietly. It was a treasure passed down from generation to generation among the torture envoys. It was specially used to control the demon realm. The original owner of this treasure was the 1,000 Swords Demon Monarch. In fact, the entire Monster Ghost realm was just another formation set up by the 1,000 Swords Demon Monarch. This secret was only known to the torture envoys of the Monster Ghost realm, and it was of great importance. This formation had a very illustrious name. It was called the Demon Spirit Execution Formation. This formation was different from the Heaven and Earth Universe formation, which was purely a defensive formation. It was an extremely powerful killing formation. Once it was activated, almost everyone who broke into it would die. The reason why the Demon Lord of 1,000 Swords chose this location to set up this killing formation was very simple. He wanted to leave a backup plan just in case he couldn't do it himself. He also didn't want the Demon Lord of the Demon Realm, the Immortal Emperor of the Immortal Realm, and the Underworld Emperor of the Underworld to recklessly break into the human world. The torture envoys of the Demon Realm were the ones who carried out the punishment on his behalf. This was also the real origin of the name of the torture envoys. However, The area covered by the demon spirit punishing formation was limited. After including the entrances to the demon realm and the underworld, it couldn't unify the entrances to the immortal realm. Therefore, the demon spirit punishing formation set up an extremely powerful soul transformation smoke at the entrance to the immortal realm. Immortal Emperor Jin Tai couldn't come to the human world even if he wanted to. Unless he wanted to die, the only way was to use the underworld realm and come out from the underworld cave. The myriad swords fiendlord's intentions were obvious. This face spirit slaughtering formation was mainly meant to deal with the big shots of the immortal, nether, and demon realms. He seemed to want to tell the three of them that even if he died, he would lock them up and not let them do whatever they wanted. The Heaven's Eye mirror in Yu Qianzhou's hand was the eye of this formation, and also the key to activating the demonic spirit punishing formation. Once the killing formation was activated, it would instantly bathe the entire demon ghost region in blood and refine the countless demon ghosts within the demon ghost region. This was the peerless name of the demon ghost celestial eradication formation. The more demonic ghosts they refined, the more powerful the killing formation would be. This was also the main reason why the torturing commissioners kept demonic ghosts and never let them out of the domain of demons and ghosts. Once the demonic monarch of the devil realm, the immortal emperor of the immortal realm, and the emperor of the underworld barged into this place, the torture commissioner would activate the killing formation. Even if the three of them survived, they wouldn't have a good ending. Although this formation was ferocious, it also had a flaw. It was too powerful, and if they weren't careful, they could implicate the entire human realm, turning it into a real ghost realm. Therefore, whenever there were too many demon ghosts in the domain of demons and ghosts, the torture commissioners would find an excuse to cleanse some of them. Through the Heaven's Eye mirror, Yu Qianzhou silently watched the entrance of the Jiu Hell Cavern. He didn't want to activate the demonic spirit punishing formation, but to see if the people from the netherworld and immortal realm would go back through the Jiu Hell Cavern. The immortal ascension plateau was sealed by the soul-dispelling smoke, so if the people from the immortal realm wanted to go back, they would have to go through the netherworld cavern. According to his calculations, there was no need for these two groups of people to stay in the human realm. The human realm's environment wasn't suitable for immortal cultivators and meditation cultivators. But if there really was someone who refused to leave, he would do anything to make up for the destruction of the heaven and earth Qianquan formation. Logically speaking, they would definitely go back, but Yu Qianzhou was worried about Rakshasa and the others in the immortal realm. They had offended Jiwu, so it was possible that they wouldn't dare to return to the immortal realm and would stay in the human realm. If that was the case, things would be troublesome. Although he had absorbed the purple fire and his cultivation level had reached the peak of the soul formation final stage, he still didn't have the confidence to deal with so many immortal cultivators. There were only two ways to completely solve this problem. One was to find Bai Changchun and deal with them. The other was to lure them into the domain of demons and ghosts and then activate the demonic spirit punishing formation to kill them in one fell swoop. As for which method to use, he hadn't decided yet. He didn't want to use either method. He could only hope that these people would go back obediently and not force him to make a choice. The vast domain of demons and ghosts that was shrouded in dark clouds had existed silently for countless years. At this time, there were nearly 1,000 people standing in the sky above the domain of demons and ghosts. They were all meditation cultivators who had escaped from the Eastern Holy Land. Everyone stared in bewilderment at the surging dark clouds in front of them. The auras of demons and ghosts were mixed together. They remembered that when they first came out of the netherworld, there were no such boundless dark clouds here. How did it become like this now? Could it be that something had happened? The netherworld saintess, who had witnessed all this, had closed her eyes and been silent for a long time. Almost all the meditation cultivators' gazes were focused on her, waiting for her instructions. Although her experience was shallow and her cultivation level wasn't that great, everyone believed her words without a doubt. The long wait made everyone look up at the blazing sun in the sky from time to time. All of them seemed a bit uncomfortable. They weren't used to being exposed to the sun. It could even be said that they hated the sun. At this time, the netherworld saintess finally opened her eyes slowly. Her eyes were as deep as autumn water, and she quietly stared at the depths of the domain of demons and ghosts. She lightly said, "We just need to go back to our netherworld. Remember, don't get into conflict with anyone, lest we provoke someone we can't afford to provoke. Let's go." The four people behind her quickly turned around and conveyed her instructions. The group of meditation cultivators obeyed and instantly swarmed toward the domain of demons and ghosts. As soon as the group of meditation cultivators with such powerful cultivations entered the domain of demons and ghosts, the powerful aura they emitted immediately deterred the demonic spirits below and made them all tremble with fear. Wherever they went, the eerie and terrifying wails and howls of ghosts immediately stopped, and everything became quiet. The chilly Wind Valley's great formation was easily penetrated by them, and they saw the way back to the netherworld that they had been dreaming about, the Netherworld Cave. As the Netherworld Saintess landed on the cliff opposite the Netherworld Cave, although the others were anxious to return, they didn't dare to trespass. They all landed behind her and waited for her next instructions. They firmly believed that as long as they followed the Saintess's instructions, they would definitely be able to return to the Netherworld safely. Yu-Ji and the others had long been alarmed, but they didn't dare to approach them. They stood far away and looked at this group of people with bewilderment and uncertainty. From the majestic death chi around them, it could be seen that they were obviously the same kind as them, but the powerful aura they emitted was not something they could compare with at all. Yu-Ji and the others couldn't imagine where these people came from. The Netherworld Saintess's gaze fell on Yu-Ji. Her deep and peaceful eyes stared at her for a long time, and then she waved to the people behind her and said, "You can go back first." As soon as her words came out, it immediately caused a commotion. The four people behind her who were protecting her were shocked. One of them immediately cupped his hands and said, "Saintess, don't you want to go back to the Netherworld? You misunderstood me. You can go first and I will come back later," the Netherworld Saintess said lightly. The four people were relieved and made a gesture to the nearly 1,000 people behind them to go back. The group of meditation cultivators immediately became excited, but in front of the Saintess, they still maintained their order and didn't appear crowded. One after another, they turned into flowing lights and shot into the 9th Netherworld Cave. However, the Saintess's four guards didn't leave, and they still surrounded and protected her. In the end, only the 5 of them were left on the cliff. The Netherworld Saintess suddenly waved at Yu-Ji and said, "Come here." Yu-Ji was shocked, but she could tell from their conversation just now that these people were from the Netherworld, and she couldn't afford to offend them at all. She gritted her teeth and was about to go forward, but the group of ghost generals behind her cried out in alarm, "Madam, you can't." Yu-Ji turned around and forced a smile, saying, "It's okay, don't worry." Then she teleported in front of the Netherworld Saintess and looked at the 4 men behind her who were staring at her with cold expressions. She quickly looked away and didn't dare to look at them. She bowed and said, "Senior, why did you summon me?" The Netherworld Saintess looked at her silently for a while, and suddenly took out a small black token and handed it over, saying, "If you encounter any trouble in the Netherworld in the future, this might be able to help you a little." Yu-Ji was startled, but she still took it and bowed respectfully, saying, "Thank you, Senior." But in her heart she was puzzled. I won't have the chance to go to the Netherworld in my life, so why would I encounter any trouble in the Netherworld? Not to mention her, even the 4 people behind the Netherworld Saintess were a little surprised. They looked at each other and didn't know why the Saintess would favor this small ghost cultivator in the mortal world. The Netherworld Saintess didn't say much, and just suddenly raised her head and looked in the direction of Obedient Island. And on Obedient Island, Yuchencho was also looking at her through the Heaven Eye mirror. Their gazes met unexpectedly in the mirror, and it seemed like they were looking at each other. Yuchencho was slightly startled, and he muttered in his heart, "This woman is so strange, could it be that she knows I'm looking at her?" While he was puzzled, the Netherworld Saintess and the other 4 had already turned into flowing lights and flashed into the 9th Netherworld Cave. The vast East Sea waves surged, and Patriarch Nenming stood on the red dragon that was flapping its wings in the air. Behind him were the surviving disciples of Xianxian Island, and Xianxian Island had long disappeared in the turbulent sea. Patriarch Nenming, who was originally sad, was now staring at the East Sacred Land with his mouth agape. The group of disciples behind him were also stunned. The East Sacred Land that had been shrouded by the white fog for countless years. The white fog that never dissipated disappeared after a great change, and the mysterious veil of the East Sacred Land was finally lifted. What terrified him the most was that he actually saw a group of people flying out of the East Sacred Land at high speed. Could it be that the East Sacred Land has already? An unimaginable thought appeared in Patriarch Nenming's mind. However, at this moment, another group of densely packed flowing lights flew over from the East Sacred Land and quickly flew over their heads. There were also flowing lights that appeared in the sky. After that person silently sized them up for a while, he turned into a flowing light and flew away. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.